2 motions, push him away, then get out of the situation safe. Okay, thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you.
Welcome back to ILTV On the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from the region. Now, here are the latest developments. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave the Israeli press a rare opportunity to question him directly last night during a press conference to mark the release of the last Israeli hostage held in Gaza, Master Sergeant Ron Vili. But with the Iran crisis heating up, Netanyahu was asked about new reports that the Trump administration is holding secret talks with the Iranian regime without Israel's knowledge, drawing this response from the Prime Minister.
תראה, לגבי הקביעות שלך, לגבי המהלכים של ארצות הברית, ארצות הברית עומדת איתנו בקשר רצוף. ואני לא רוצה לקבוע לנשיא טראמפ מה הוא יעשה או לא יעשה, מה ידבר, לא ידבר, זה החלטות שלו, אבל אני אומר לך שאנחנו, איך אגיד לך, מדווחים בצורה מלאה. מעבר לזה אני לא רוצה להתייחס.
Regarding Gaza, Prime Minister Netanyahu insisted that Phase 2 of the Trump peace plan, which will advance somewhat this week with the reopening of the Rafah crossing, will not move to the reconstruction stage of Gaza unless Hamas first disarms, nor will Israel allow Turkey and Qatar a security role in Gaza.
אני שומע גם עכשיו את האמירות שנאפשר את שיקום עזה לפני הפירוז. זה לא יקרה. אני שומע שנכניס חיילים טורקים וחיילים קטרים לעזה. גם זה לא יקרה. אני שומע שאני אאפשר הקמת מדינה פלסטינית בעזה. זה לא קרה וזה לא יקרה.
But the comment from Netanyahu that is making the most headlines here was his explosive charge that the Biden administration's withholding of certain arms shipments during the Gaza war ended up costing the lives of Israeli soldiers there.
ופשוט בשלב מסוים לא היה לנו מספיק תחמושת. ואנשים נפלו, גיבורים נפלו. חלק מאובדן התחמושת הזה היה גם כתוצאה מאמברגו. ואני גמרתי אומר שלא נגיע למצב הזה יותר. שאנחנו חייבים שתהיה לנו תעשיית נשק רובוסטית ועצמאית ככל האפשר. אגב, המצב הזה של האמברגו השתנה עד לבלי הכר עם כניסת הממשל של הנשיא טראמפ.
Well, those remarks drew fire from some Democrats in the U.S., including the former Biden administration Mideast envoy Amos Hochstein, who shot back on Twitter that after the military support that Israel did receive from the U.S. during the Gaza and Iran conflicts, quote, the only acceptable response to President Biden and the American people is thank you. Meanwhile, President Trump confirmed that an additional large American naval force, including aircraft carriers, destroyers, and support vessels, is now moving toward the region within striking distance of Iran. The buildup is intended to deter Iranian aggression and signal readiness as the situation there rapidly evolves.
And in June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity in Operation Midnight Hammer. You saw that. People have been waiting for 22 years to do that, and we were right at the end. They were about a month away from having a nuclear weapon. We had to do it. And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time they'd have a country.
Now, the military deployment comes as Iran faces one of the most serious internal crises in years. A New York Times report suggested that the Iranian government's hold on power is at its weakest point since the Shah was overthrown in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Now, thousands, if not tens of thousands of Iranians have been killed as the regime's security forces responded to protests with live fire, mass arrests, and sweeping internet shutdowns. Now, the exact numbers of killed are yet to be confirmed, as an internet blackout was in place to cover for the grotesque murderous actions of the regime. Now, the regime has deployed Revolutionary Guard units internally and issued increasingly severe warnings, including threats of executions against protesters accused of waging war against God. Iranian officials have also accused foreign powers, including Israel and the United States, of fueling the unrest, a familiar tactic as pressure mounts at home. Here in Israel, the developments are being closely monitored at the highest levels. Security officials say Israel is now on heightened alert, with Prime Minister Netanyahu warning the Iranian regime that any attack on their part will be met with a force that they've never seen before. Now, as the American military presence continues to build up in the region in anticipation of a possible escalation against the Islamic regime in Iran, CENTCOM, or Central Command in the Middle East, have announced an operational readiness exercise with deployments to contingency sites. The military goal is to test readiness and demonstrate the ability to deploy, disperse, and sustain combat air powers as concerns of a possible confrontation with Iran's regime continues to grow. According to CENTCOM, the exercise is intended to improve the dispersal of assets and personnel, strengthen regional partnerships, and prepare for rapid response throughout the command's area. Air crews will deploy to multiple contingency locations with the approval of host nations and in close coordination with civilian and military authorities, this according to a CENTCOM statement. The announcement follows the arrival of the U.S. aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln and its task force in the Middle East, accompanied by several warships. Now, with the readiness drill and the U.S. Armada in place, poised to strike, all eyes remain on President Donald Trump to see what comes next. And joining us now for more is Dr. Eric Mandel. He is the founder and director of MEPIN, that's the Middle East Political and Information Network, and also Reserves IDF Lieutenant Colonel Advocate Maurice Hirsch. He's now with the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Gentlemen, lots to break down here on Iran and Gaza. Before we get to that, though, I do want to just go back to those remarks that Prime Minister Netanyahu made last night, especially one that is creating headlines, certainly here in Israel. His comments about the impact of the Biden administration's embargo or withholding of certain weapons during the Gaza conflict, saying it did cost Israeli lives, and of course drawing feedback, let's say, or criticism, certainly among some Democrats in the U.S. Eric, I want to get just your response to this.
So I was there in southern Gaza, and there was definitely an ammunition slowdown, the transfer of weapons. I think they did it via maybe withholding military license. It was a sophisticated way of slowing it down, but not not officially making it. Israel definitely delayed going into Rafah. I have great respect for people like Brett McGurk, who said this, but I think they're all just circling the wagons to defend President Biden. But there's no doubt Amit Siegel reported that he had firsthand conversations himself, that, confirming it. And I don't think it's any surprise that that was going on at the time. He also reported, I did not know about bulldozers. If those were the D9s, that means that Israel had to go in to areas with infantrymen and not use and did risk some soldiers. The idea that Prime Minister Netanyahu brought this up, I think is, as somebody who just came back from Washington and 3 days of briefing in Congress, I just don't think it to throw kerosene into the fire. There's enough problems between Democrats, Republicans regarding Israel. I'm not sure what this did, other than this is the beginning of campaign season in Israel.
Right. Well, let me ask you about that, Maurice. Of course, even if the substance is correct, the question being raised, even among here in Israel, is why did Prime Minister Netanyahu feel a need to bring that up publicly? Usually that's the kind of comment maybe more behind closed doors, and bring it up publicly in this forum. The Democrats certainly are not going to be happy, and they still are major part of the Congress, and maybe part of the next administration.
Without question, Kalev, it's a tricky situation, and it's tricky timing as well. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been under attack from all types of camps in Israel, accusing him of extending the war because of the hostages for political reasons, for not going into Rafah quickly enough, for delaying the onslaught into Rafah. Everything that was done during the war became Prime Minister Netanyahu's fault, without exception. Most of the criticism was absent of any context. What Dr. Mandel said very, very clearly, and we all know this to be true, the US administration of President Biden held up the entrance of the IDF forces into Rafah. They held up the progression of the war. They did cost lives, unfortunately. There was equipment, there was armaments that we needed in order to execute the war that were held back, whether it be soft delays in licensing or directly with armaments themselves. All of these were tactics that were implemented in order to impose Washington's view of what Israel should have been doing in the war. And that was something which did both hold up the war and was unnecessary. The argument was that we can't go into Rafah because it's impossible to move the population out of Rafah. We did that. It was possible. Every one of the arguments that was being made at the time, this question as to whether Israel was committing a genocide in Gaza and breaching the laws of war, that was really a despicable ploy that was implemented at the time as well. That is something which Israel has always adhered to the laws of war. We have that as part of our policy, as part of our doctrine, and all of those different tactics that we used, we've seen really the change, the diametric change with the entrance of President Trump coming into office, both of the support for Israel, unrestricted against the people who are clearly the aggressors, the genocidal terrorists, and the moral high ground as well, being we are supporting our allies in the face of this onslaught, as opposed to some of the strict restrictions that were imposed by the Biden administration. And just for the historical record, it's important to set that true. It's unfortunate if it offends some of the Democrats, but that's the reality of the situation. And whilst it may not play out nicely, particularly for the ears of those who criticize Israel, it is something that has to be said openly, clearly moving forward. It's something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has also committed to changing going forward. No longer being reliant on other people for our armaments. That's a change that's going to have to be implemented. Also weaning Israel off of the US military aid, which has also come up as part of this discussion. Let's not forget that was part of what I term Obama's honey trap for Israel. Let's give Israel a massive military support program, but ensure that we are totally in control of what Israel does, how Israel uses that support, and how Israel can then use those armaments in order to defend itself. This wasn't a war that we started. This wasn't a war that we asked for. And at the critical time when we needed to move forward and free our hostages and to vanquish Hamas, there were brakes put on in Washington, unfortunately, and that is the reality.
All right. Well, let's move a little bit to the current situation and future situation in Gaza, because, Eric, we have now moving into, I guess, certainly officially phase 2 of the Gaza plan. We're going to see a reopening of the Rafah crossing. Prime Minister Netanyahu trying to set some red lines here in terms of moving forward, saying we're not going to allow reconstruction without first there being disarming and demilitarization. But you do hear talk, reports of at least some administration officials, Trump administration officials. So maybe this will be a process carried out concurrently. There'll be partial demilitarization with partial reconstruction. We won't have Turkish soldiers in Gaza, but we'll have Turkish security officials perhaps overseeing some of it. So the question is how firm Prime Minister Netanyahu will be able to hold to those lines under pressure from the Trump administration.
This is a slippery slope, and I think part of the reason that I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government are going to concede on some issues is because you have so many other issues going on simultaneously. I think you have obviously Iran front and center. You have possible major kinetic action that will be needed beyond what is being done up in the north. And Syria is still, out there. And so you have we have with the Syrians massacring Kurds. I mean, there are so many things that are here. I think what people need to realize is that in Gaza, Israel has taken more of the yellow zone. It's up to about 59%. That means only 41% of the red zone. The red zone is only 41%, but holds 99% of the population. And it basically, people also need to realize that separating the words disarmament from demilitarization is very important. Disarmament means transferring all of Hamas's weapons, and you should not have any distinction between offensive and defensive weapons, because if they keep their defensive weapons, their AK-47s, they will still dominate the population and intimidate any Palestinian technocrats. And the longer process is demilitarization, getting rid of the tunnel network. I spoke to one of Israel's former national security advisors last week, and I asked them how long will this operation take, because they've already planned for going into Gaza City, one of the two major hubs of Hamas, and it's going to take at least 9 months. Now, imagine how that will play out in the American public, especially as we get closer and closer to the 2026 election for midterm congressional elections. It is not going to look good when pictures come back again of children. There'll be food insecurity. Children will be injured, and that will go on week in and week out, month in and month out, if Israel is fully committed there. And I don't believe the president is going to want Israel to do that. So all of these partial things are a trap for Israel, and getting rid of Hamas totally. Hamas again keeps changing its demands, and they again saying that they're not going to disarm until there's a Palestinian state. Obviously, things that aren't going to happen. So the president gave a 2-month deadline. He said for them to disarm. He didn't mention demilitarization, but disarm. Well, what will happen at that deadline? We see what the president, how he feels about deadlines. He usually respects them. Think back at the 12-day war with Iran. So if Israel goes in, then it's going to be a huge political problem between U.S. and Israel relations. And there's where the Democrats will certainly come in. And there'll be plenty of Republicans also that aren't going to like the images coming out.
Right. And Maurice, Eric's saying it's going to be hard for Prime Minister Netanyahu right now to stand completely firm against President Trump or some of his officials in the administration. And there are some who would argue that already there's been a kind of fudging of these red lines. Israel is not in control of the Rafah crossing per se. There are Turkish and Qatari officials, at least in the oversight board of the administration of Gaza. There's former PA officials involved in the administration. So how do you expect Prime Minister Netanyahu to handle that current situation, especially if, as Eric says, Israel is going to need U.S. help with Iran in the coming, we don't know, days or even weeks?
So I think obviously moving on to the second stage of the plan, Kalev has its difficulties. There's the operative really paragraph of the plan, which and the question then is, what does President Trump see going forward? His vision when he laid it out was very, very clear. Hamas and the other terrorist factions will have no place in governance of Gaza. All the military terror infrastructure will be destroyed, including the tunnels, and not rebuilt. All of the weapons will be decommissioned, and Hamas will be disarmed. This President Trump, I believe, understands, and so too Prime Minister Netanyahu understands, that this is the only way forward for the Gaza Strip, unless we want to guarantee that this was not the last war in Gaza. If we want to guarantee that there will be continuing cycles of violence in the Gaza Strip, then the way to do it is to allow Hamas to dictate the terms of their surrender, to really refuse the conditions that they've already accepted. The Trump plan detailed the acceptance of Hamas, not only of freeing the hostages, but also of this disarmament. And I'm sure that President Trump is relying or expecting the members of the Board of Peace who have leverage over Hamas to use that leverage to their full extent. That means Qatar must be actively involved in threatening Hamas that if they do not comply with the agreements that they made, then their leadership in Doha will be expelled. Turkey, Erdogan, must similarly use his influence over Hamas. Hamas is a very, very rich terrorist organization, predominantly based on hundreds of different companies that were set up and operate in Turkey under the control of Erdogan. He has massive control and leverage over Hamas. And I'm sure that President Trump will be expecting Erdogan to use that leverage in order to ensure that Hamas does indeed live up to its commitments and comply with that requirement for disarmament. I think this is going to be something which we're still seeing coming about. We saw as part of the latest movement and statement going forward that the International Stabilization Force, which is meant to be the force that's in charge of implementing this disarmament, that's meant to be there to destroy the terror infrastructure, is now starting to take force. It has a general. We're waiting to see who the soldiers of that mechanism will be. And only then can we start moving forward. There's no point in starting a rebuilding of Gaza if it will again be subject to the abuses of Hamas, if half of the materials that go into the Gaza Strip are used not to build the future of prosperity for Hamas, for the Gaza Strip, but is used for rebuilding and reestablishing Hamas's terror infrastructure underground. That is not the goal of everybody. Or anybody, to be more exact. And so I think both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu understand that moving forward.
All right, gentlemen, I want to move over to Iran. I do have some sort of breaking news here, with, of course, in the form of a tweet from President Trump just in the last few minutes. It's quite long. I'll just briefly, a massive armada is heading to Iran, moving quickly with great power and enthusiasm. It is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence, if necessary. Hopefully, Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal. No nuclear weapons, one that is good for all parties. Time is running out. It is truly of the essence. As I told Iran once before, make a deal. They didn't. It was Operation Midnight Hammer. The next attack will be far worse. Eric, I want to get your response. A couple of interesting points here. One, obviously, President Trump is still hoping to have some serious negotiations, something, of course, people here in Israel and supporters of Israel are quite skeptical about. Also interesting, he's focusing there on nuclear weapons. Nothing about, for example, the internal protests in Iran and the brutal crackdown and some of the other officials there. How much, in the balance of Trump striking Iran or really trying to strike a deal, when you look at this type of tweet, where does that place it, your estimation in how it breaks down?
Well, I think one of the things we need to realize is, who does the president listen to? It's a very tight circle of people. When in Trump 1.0, the first term, he had a more traditional, conventional group of advisors. Now he has a very tight group where Tom Barak, Witkoff, Kushner, it's a very small group that he listens to. And who else does he listen to? The Turks and the Qataris. And so let's look at what Foreign Minister Fadan said. He said, Iran is ready to renew negotiations on nuclear issue. We should resolve the issues one by one, starting with the nuclear. So Turkey is doing Iran's bidding to stretch this out and to make the illusion, and the Iranians are great at this, of smiling and saying, we can do some negotiations. Steve Witkoff seems to be either the good guy or bad guy, whoever you look at it, pushing for negotiations and a deal. Can you believe Iran is going to follow a deal? If you remember, it's just a few weeks ago that President Trump gave Bibi Netanyahu in Mar-a-Lago the permission to strike the ballistic missiles, which are the immediate existential threat to Israel as they're ramping up their production. Whether they have enough launches or not is a different story. My great fear is Iran is going to ask their North Korean friends to ship over some nuclear warheads on a container ship quietly, and then all of a sudden claim that we're nuclear and now we're immune to attack. I think the Iranian protesters, I work with Iran International with dissidents, maybe it's 10 to 30,000 people have been killed. I've looked at the images they've sent me. It is horrific how the human rights warriors in the United States remain silent, and around the world, over one of the greatest massacres, certainly of the 21st century, but going back, it looks towards like World War II. So I think at this point, the president's getting mixed signals. And what I'm hoping he will do is stand firm. And what does standing firm mean? It means zero enrichment. What did President Obama do? He conceded without getting anything in return, which he should never even conceded, Iran's right to enrich uranium, the world's leading state sponsor of terror, according to my State Department. And we have a situation where they have ballistic missiles. And there has to be punishment for the IRGC and its Basij million-man army that has terrorized the people, because they've crossed the president's red line. The president does not want to look like President Obama with the red line of Syria. So I don't know what's going to happen. The president has surprised me quite a few times. There are no leaks that come out now because it's a very tight circle, but I'm hoping that he listens to the people who will say that Iran cannot remain as a regime the way it is now. Now, regime collapse, as we have discussed in the past, regime collapse does not mean regime change for the better. But I will tell you, everybody I spoke with in Israel, across the political spectrum when I was there just a short time ago, said, I'll take my chances of bringing down this regime because I can't imagine anything worse.
Right.
But the devil is really horrific. So we'll see. And by the way, if the Ayatollah goes, it could be it doesn't matter. IRGC, maybe a gift to them so they can put in a puppet supreme leader.
But Maurice, an agreement that would ban enrichment in Iran and limit its nuclear weapons, but not necessarily, at least initially, address both the activities of Iranian proxies and Iran's own oppression of its own people. I mean, is that still a win for Israel?
So I think we have to just 1 second look at that statement of President Trump in a slightly different context, if you'll allow me, Khalif. I think that when you focus on the right and the reason for the military intervention being Iran's nuclear program, the ballistic missiles, and moving forward, President Trump is really readjusting the discussion, because the question that arises, no matter how you like it or you don't, under international law, is whether America can intervene in Iran simply because, and I don't mean to in any way make light of this, simply because the regime is murdering Iranians on the street. That raises a question in international law, but focusing on the military capabilities, the military buildup, which includes obviously the ballistic missiles, I would say that it wasn't necessary to note every single element of that military buildup, is more focusing the discussion on what would be the right justifications and the best justifications for US intervention in Iran, rather than simply relying on the regime change and the fact that they're butchering people in the street, which some would argue that I don't know how many of the viewers saw the statement of the UN Human Rights Council. The connection between them and human rights is completely incidental, of course, condemning already before anything has happened President Trump and saying that any strike in Iran would be a breach of international law.
Maurice, I am going to leave it there. Maurice Hirsch and Dr. Eric Mandel, thank you so much for joining us on ILTV today.
Thank you for having us.
And just one final note. Right now, the final Israeli hostage to be returned from Gaza, Police Master Sergeant Ryan Veely, is being laid to rest. His funeral taking place in the southern Israeli town of Meitar. Of course, Veely just 24 years old when he died defending kibbutz Alomim during the October 7th attack, and his body abducted into Gaza. Veely's casket left from the Shura Army base near Ramlah this morning, escorted by a police motorcade to his hometown in southern Israel. He served as an officer in the Israel Police Special Yassam unit. He was honored by fellow police officers who lined the route to pay his respects. Thousands at the funeral, including, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog, who will both speak there. May his memory be a blessing. And that ends this broadcast for now. Stay tuned to ILTV. And I'm Khaled Ben David. Thank you for joining us.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect, thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Good evening, I'm Ayan Hoffman, and welcome to Insider. Tonight on our program, as we mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day, we are asking an uncomfortable but necessary question. Are we recognizing the warning signs in front of us or repeating old mistakes? A new report by Tel Aviv University finds that Holocaust remembrance around the world is increasingly focused on the righteous among the nations. Stories of moral courage and rescue. These stories matter. But scholars also warn they must not blur the harsh historical reality of widespread indifference and collaboration. To unpack what this moment means, I am joined by Dr. Radu Ioanid, Romania's ambassador to Israel, a leading Holocaust historian and one of the clearest international voices to speak out since October 7th. Tonight, we connect Holocaust memory, rising anti-Semitism, and the urgent question of what never again demands of us today. Let's get started. So, Your Excellency, you wear two hats. You are an ambassador here in Israel and a Holocaust historian. How did your personal and your professional relationship with Holocaust history begin?
Well, I belong to a mixed family in the sense that my father was Jewish, may he rest in peace. He was half Ashkenaz, half Sephardic. And my mother was Protestant. And my father was at forced labor, was beaten up in Bucharest. He suffered as a teenager, not as much as other Jews in Romania, but nevertheless. My mother lived in Oradea, Nagyvárad, and she witnessed the deportation of the Jews from Oradea. So since I was a kid, I knew something about the Holocaust. And also in Romania, unfortunately, Holocaust in Romania was forbidden as a subject. So I started to dig and deeper and deeper, and this is how the whole thing started.
Wow, now Romania itself, as you said, has a very complex Holocaust legacy. How does that history shape your work today, especially as Romania's ambassador to Israel?
Well, I worked for many years, for 31 years, for the Holocaust Museum in Washington. I have 2 PhDs, one which was made in Romania on fascist ideology in Romania, the second in Paris, France, on the Holocaust in Romania. So besides working for the Holocaust Museum as a researcher, I did my own research on the Holocaust in Romania, and this is how I am who I am as a historian.
And how does that fit into what you're doing today in Israel? Was it important for you to come here after knowing all the information, after knowing what happened during the Holocaust?
It was crucially important because I always cared about the state of Israel. I respected deeply its history. I cared a lot about the archives of the Holocaust, which are extremely rich, extremely diverse. Sometimes I'm joking, saying that I know more than Israelis about Holocaust archives in Israel.
Certainly more than some of us.
Yes.
So, you're also very deeply connected, though, to the Romanian Jewish community that lives here in Israel, from what I understand. So tell me a little bit about what that relationship looks like, and how does engaging with survivors of the Holocaust, their descendants, their families, shape your understanding of the importance of the Jewish state today?
So, look, Holocaust in Romania, it's a very, very strange story because in spite of the fact that it started very early and a very savage, brutal way, it's a homegrown Holocaust. It was a homegrown Holocaust. It also, because of the opportunism of Romanian authorities, fascist authorities, half of the Romanian Jews survived the Holocaust, and many of these people came to Israel. So Aliyah to Israel was huge. These were most of them highly educated people who contributed deeply to the well-being, to the development of the state of Israel. And there are a couple of major organizations of Jews from Romania, like Amir, who organizes every year as a commemoration of the Romanian Holocaust, which is in October, because this is when the Jews from Transylvania, not from Transylvania, I'm sorry, from Bessarabia and Bukovina were deported to Ukraine. And also HOR, it's another organization which also does important work for the Romanian Jews originating from Romania. We need to remember something very briefly about the Holocaust in Romania. There is a Holocaust which happened under the Romanian fascist authorities in between the Danube and the Bug rivers in Ukraine, because part of Ukraine was occupied by Romania. And there is a Hungarian Holocaust which took place in northern Transylvania, which was occupied by Hungary.
And today, do you know how many Romanians or descendants of Romanian Jews live in Israel?
Yes, our estimates are that we are talking, if we are counting the second and third generation, probably 600,000 people.
Wow, that's
so
quite
it's
a
huge.
Number, yeah.
It's huge.
Especially considering the number of only 10 million in Israel and only about 8.5 of those Jewish. Now, since October 7th, you've been unusually vocal compared to many other diplomats. What compelled you to speak out when so many other diplomats that were here on the ground chose to be silent?
Look, I think that what happened on October 7th was a horrendous crime. Indeed, always Israel defended itself from the point of view of social media well enough, I'm not sure. But one thing is clear. Immediately after October 7th happened, and I don't need to tell you what happened on October 7th, what I witnessed back in United States, in Western Europe, less in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe will come back to this, hopefully. It's a little bit different. I saw savage anti-Zionist propaganda made by people who don't even know too much about Israel. I'll give you an example which outraged me. Greta Thunberg. Tell me, please, and it's a rhetorical question, where is she when it comes to Iran and the people who were massacred by thousands or maybe tens of thousands? She's nowhere. And I tell you something. And where are the flotillas going to Iran? I see only the old flotillas coming here. And you know why they came here? Because they knew that nothing will happen to them. So this is outrageous. I saw in United States, and some of them I know them very well, Jewish people, daughters or sons of survivors, making anti-Zionist propaganda. So this outraged me, and this is part of the explanation.
So when you chose to speak out, why do you think, let's go backwards a little bit and tell me, why do you think that this was going on in Western Europe and in the United States? When you saw it and it outraged you, what do you think caused it?
Look, if we talk about anti-Semitism, we can see, and let's look only at Europe. We can divide Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, post-communist Europe, can be anti-Semitic, and we can come back, if you wish, to Romania from this point of view. But this is a classic old type of anti-Semitism. You Jews, you crucified Jesus Christ, you brought Bolshevism, you brought abortion, you are too modern for us, things like this. Western Europe is different. Western Europe is more left-wing oriented when it comes to anti-Semitism, average speaking. Of course, they have their own Nazis too, or right-wing extremists. But it's, the old cliche, South Africa in terms of races doesn't exist. So Israel is allegedly a colonial state, and we need to fight Israel from the river to the sea. And all this nonsense, to speak nicely.
Yeah. And so let's circle back to Romania for just a moment. How is anti-Semitism in your own country today?
Look, I'll tell you something which I read yesterday in the Romanian press, and I wasn't very happy because the gentleman is confused. There is a soccer player called Ofri Arad, and he said there is no anti-Semitism in Romania. I mean, if he meant that Israelis and Jews are safe in the streets of Bucharest and nobody will harm them, he's absolutely right. But there is anti-Semitism in Romania. I would even say that it's at the level of 28-30%. It's the old type of anti-Semitism again. Jews who crucified Jesus Christ. You brought Bolshevik upon us, Bolshevik ideology or communist ideology upon us. But to say that we have the Islamic-inspired anti-Semitism in Romania, or to say that Jews are not safe, it's not fair. On the other hand, we have members of the parliament who made fascist salutes, who insulted or aggressed the leader of the Jewish community. So it would be it would be not correct to say that there is no anti-Semitism. This gentleman who's a soccer player is not very good when it comes to this evaluation. Sorry to say it.
So let me ask you this. I mean, there are areas in Eastern Europe where we do see some real resistance against anti-Semitism, much more so, in fact, than you're seeing in areas of the West. What are some of those areas of resistance? Where do you see countries that are succeeding?
I will give you the Romanian example. We were a handful of people in Romania or outside who were combating anti-Semitism. And we had a report, an official report, chaired, the commission was chaired by Elie Wiesel. Vice chair was an Israeli gentleman, an American one was me. And this commission had very strong recommendations. We have a lot of politicians who care about this issue. So there are other countries too who are very careful in trying, with more or less success, in combating anti-Semitism. Success can go both sides, because, for example, in Romania we have an excellent legislation combating anti-Semitism, but our prosecutors and our judges are not doing enough in order to enforce this legislation. So it's a mixed bag, but there is hope.
And I love to hear the words of hope, especially when we're on a day like Holocaust Memorial Day, Remembrance Day. And also I want to talk about, therefore, October 7th. October 7th, as you brought up, was a terrorist attack. It was a massacre against the state of Israel. But the global reaction, as you also said, was very different than what Israel would have expected. There were people that flew into the streets and flooded them and chanted anti-Semitic tropes. At what point did you realize that anti-Semitism was driving so much of the response to the October 7th and not actually Israel's actions? Very quickly.
I realized this very quickly. But to tell you what are exactly the cases is not so easy. Because if you look at my country of adoption until a certain point, because as I told you, I'm also a US citizen, there are at least several vectors, trends, which can define anti-Semitism. We have the KKK and Nazi type of anti-Semitism. We have the very left-wing anti-Zionist anti-Semitism, and I'm sure that some of these people don't even know what this is about when it comes to Israel. There is this famous scene, which I'm sure you saw, with a young lady who is tearing down some flags, saying, you Zionists, you criminals, this and that. And she was tearing down a Greek flag because it's blue and white. I mean, this poor creature didn't even know the difference between a Greek flag, which has a cross, and an Israeli flag. And then we have, from certain countries from the Middle East, money pouring in, inciting this propaganda. And the FBI should be more clear, in my view, in telling us which of these factors are determinant in one place, be it a university or a city or another, because there are three factors at least.
Sure, and it seems like they're starting to try to get to the bottom of that, especially with regards to Qatar, Iran, the people who are the countries that you say are funding a lot of this for more than 30 years.
Hopefully.
Now, as a historian, how do you distinguish legitimate criticism of Israel from anti-Semitism that echoes from those much darker periods that we're referencing?
Like any other country, Israel can be criticized and should be criticized. Why should we be able to criticize France or Romania or United States and not criticize Israel? It's absolutely legitimate. However, when somebody says that Israel shouldn't exist, this is unacceptable. It's simply unacceptable because at that point we are talking about destroying a country. And why shouldn't a country made by Jews, many of them survivors of the Holocaust, not exist when any other country can exist? And which are the other countries which are denied existence? So we are dealing here with a very, very simple and basic matter, the right of this country to exist. We have the right to criticize Israel, and I was one of the people who also criticized certain politicians who like in this country to shake hands with European fascists. And this I also consider unacceptable.
100%. Now, the latest report from Tel Aviv University, which was actually released today in honor of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, it shows a growing global focus on righteous among the nations. Why do you think that the world is gravitating right now toward these kinds of stories?
This is a very interesting question. I will tell you why I think that this is happening. I'm not sure that I'm right. You correct me, please. People and states and countries love to have a good conscience. So if we talk about rescuers, about righteous Gentile, this gives us a passport toward heaven. When in fact, and the subject is important because we had so many cases when people looked the other way or even were not only bystanders but also inciters and criminals. But we need also to look why we have righteous Gentiles. Some of them are extremely important. We had one in Romania who was the mayor of Chernobyl, who rescued only 17,000 Jews. He's a righteous Gentile in Yad Vashem. Nobody talks about him. His name was Traian Popovic. So it's an important subject, but when we touch this subject, we should, in my view, make sure that we understand why that person became a righteous Gentile, because he didn't come from heaven or from some garden of miracles to rescue. He or she rescued because people were in danger, because people were slaughtered, because people were maimed.
Because they had a good conscience. And exactly. It's interesting what you said about, maybe to make themselves feel better and feel good. And I would think today, especially when these countries have rising anti-Semitism, they're going back to the stories of the righteous Gentiles. This is, again, just my opinion, back to yours, maybe to make themselves feel better also about what's going on. It's about
feeling good about something which wasn't so good.
Yeah, 100%. Now, is there a danger, though, that focusing on those rescuers allows societies to avoid confronting the more broader responsibility that they had during the Holocaust, maybe focusing only on that and not on what actually happened?
Of course, if we go only to the positive when it comes to such a horrendous story like the one of the Holocaust, there is a danger. But we need to look very, very carefully, because there are countries and countries. Some countries are dealing with this subject in good conscience, trying hard to educate people. There are countries who are doing it only in order to please Israel, but in fact, they are, on the other hand, and I'm not going to name names here, but on the other hand...
So I won't ask.
Yes, but on the other hand, they are, in fact, praising their own fascists as, founding fathers of XYZ nation. So we have some examples in Europe, and I think that Israel should be careful in choosing its friends.
Good message for our leaders. Now, France recently designated a national day marking Alfred Dreyfus's exoneration. What does the continued relevance of the Dreyfus affair tell us about Europe today?
So I would like to say something about France. France is a country which has problems when it comes to anti-Semitism, but it's also a country which very early, starting with President Chirac, acknowledged its role in the Holocaust, its own role in the Holocaust. It's a country where there is a real cult for resistance, anti-Nazi resistance, and for the Jews who are active in the resistance, and it's a country which honors the Jewish victims. Now, Dreyfus, to come back to your question, is a very strong symbol of classic, all type of anti-Semitism. Jews are not us. Jews are traitors. Jews are working against our nation. And the fact that, again, and in such a powerful way, France is honoring Dreyfus is a very positive thing.
And I want to end with this. You know, there are those that believe that we are living in another pre-Holocaust moment, even if it doesn't resemble the 1930s or the 1940s on the surface. Do you believe like some of those people?
Let me be slightly cautious, because if I would be able to guess the future, I wouldn't be here with you. I would have a different setting in my life. But first of all, I need to tell you that I fully agree with Danny Dayan, my good friend, the chairman of Yad Vashem, who says that what happened on 7th of October is horrendous crime, but it's not the Holocaust. The Holocaust is unique, and whoever tries to, willingly or not, to deny its uniqueness does disservice to the history of Jewish people. I am not sure that history cannot repeat itself in one way or another. Think about Rwanda and what happened in a few months with 800,000 people. So there is no guarantee that history cannot repeat itself. We need all of us to be vigilant. Diplomats should speak out in a more forceful way about what happened and what can happen, and let's be together when it comes to this subject.
So, Mr. Ambassador, as we close up the interview, what is your message today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day to diplomats, academics, and moral leaders who may privately agree with what you are saying, but are choosing not to speak publicly?
Speak your conscience and don't make compromises. So simple. That's all.
Such a simple message. Thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners today. And unfortunately, as I said, we are out of time. So I really want to thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, if you found this discussion valuable, please check out the ILTV podcast for a further series of in-depth interviews on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ayan Hoffman. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Nearly 30 American college student leaders from diverse faith backgrounds are ringing in the new year in Israel while participating in Jewish National Fund USA's Caravan for Democracy. The 7-day fully subsidized program equips attendees with the confidence to return to their college campuses and advocate for informed, constructive dialogue about Israel and the Middle East with their peers. Joining us today are two Caravan for Democracy students to share their experiences, Andrew Norton and Polly Johnston. Thank you so much for being here. Andrew, let's start with you. Why did you, as a non-Jewish student leader, want to come to Israel at this particular time?
Reasons. First one is this is the Holy Land. I want to see it as a devout Christian where my faith comes from, right? I want to see the Bible come alive. I want to see the steps and the places and the things that make my faith so true, much more than believing. And this is the place to do that. And so that was the first reason. And secondly, it is, of course, to understand truly the Jewish side of this war, to understand the Israeli side of this war, to understand kind of just the reality of what's happening over here. I find myself in conversation with students from all different races and places. And I often see that they have opinions and they have arguments and they want to talk and debate. And I kind of hit an information block. And that information block comes when you haven't physically seen, you haven't physically viewed the place that you're thinking about, the place that you're talking about, the place that you're trying to strive and defend. And so that was one of the reasons, in addition to my faith, that I wanted to come out and truly see Israel.
And you, Polly?
Very much the same situation, but also I think there's no better time to come to Israel. We are just getting out of the post-war issues and also awaiting the last hostage to come home. And I think that's a really important thing because now we can see the life and the joy and the resilience of the Israeli people and how connected everyone is. But also back home, I have a lot of Jewish friends and family friends. So this is very personal as well, especially knowing that some friends are here in Israel right now.
Polly, what has been the most surprising part of your experience?
I think one of the most surprising parts is how joyful and kind everyone is. I think we back home in the United States are given this one perception that Israel is very similar. Everyone's the same. Everyone comes from the same background, and it's very oppressive and cruel. And that's just not the case at all. Everyone has their own opinions, and everyone comes from a different background, and they have different reasons for why they believe in what they believe. And they're not afraid to tell you, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Andrew, how will Caravan for Democracy impact you as a leader and an ally when you return to campus?
Perception. I think that I'm thankful to Jewish National Fund, first off, for this opportunity. And in this opportunity, one of the things they talked about was you're going to physically see this perspective that's going to be able to handle and guide your conversation back home. And so that's truly what it's done. Out here, Caravan for Democracy has quite literally caravaned us across Israel to see just all the different places, the points for more than just the Jewish religion, all of them, including our own. And so it's one of those things where you truly now see, understand, have lived it, have experienced it to a degree that helps carry and guide this conversation towards a reality that we seek, right? A reality that offers peace, that offers safety, that offers respect for Jewish students, Jewish people, the religion as a whole, as well as the entire country of Israel.
Polly, what's one thing about Israel that you want to make sure your peers know?
Honestly, I want to make sure that they know everyone is connected and everyone is affected by what happens to the state of Israel and to the people of Israel. I don't think people back home understand quite how fully connected everyone is and how well people can get along despite their differences.
And you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that what we really want to bring home is kind of also the opportunity for people to kind of strive and engage in conversation more. Engage in conversation that directs people towards the reality truth, right? I talked about the perspective and things like that I love. And so that's something that I learned here is really just the perspective that says, man, this is a welcoming group of people. This is the home of three religions. This is a land that offers and wants and seeks peace with everything. And so that's the one thing I want to be able to share, bring to people, and kind of pass forward.
Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As the largest provider of Israel engagement programs in the U.S., Jewish National Fund USA inspires a lifelong Zionist identity through youth, travel, and cultural experiences, helping individuals stay connected to the land and people of Israel for life. The organization also offers high school and college students of all backgrounds the opportunity to experience Israel in diverse ways that extend far beyond the classroom. To learn more, visit jnf.org.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Israel's only English news channel, bringing you the headlines that matter every hour, straight from the center of where it's all unfolding.
Your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Diva Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. The funeral procession of Master Sergeant Ran Gvili is taking place now in Kibbutz Alumim in southern Israel. Policemen and women line the streets, saluting the convoy carrying the body of the slain hostage, paying their final respects to the former Yassam Special Unit officer. Gvili was returned for burial in Israel after 843 days in Hamas captivity. Attending his funeral were Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, members of his coalition, President Herzog and his wife, security officials, military personnel, and Israel police, and massive crowds of Israelis. Israelis who looked at Ran as a symbol, Israelis who resonated with his story and waited so patiently for his return. Talik, Gvili's mother, mourned her fallen son, but also sent words of strength. Take a listen.
רן תדאג שם מלמעלה, לאחד את כולם, כי אני פה, למטה, קצת דואגת. רן תבקש מהרוגי המלכות להתאחד, לשלוח כוח לכל עם ישראל, לחזק את החיילים ואת השוטרים שלנו, כי אנחנו עדיין במשימה לחסל את האויבים. חמאס, ג'יהאד, טרוריסטים מזוהמים, ניסיתם להפחיד אותנו. ניסיתם להבהיל את עם ישראל. תראו מה נשאר ממכם. חכו. ותראו מה יישאר ממכם.
Speaking at the funeral, President Isaac Herzog reminded the crowd of the sheer bravery of Ran Gvili and his valiant effort to fight for our homeland. Let's hear the clip.
אנחנו עומדים כאן היום בשעה קדושה, שוברת לב, שבה רני הגיבור והאהוב, החטוף האחרון, מובא סוף סוף למנוחת עולמים באדמת הבית. הבית אותו אהב, הבית שלמענו נלחם יחד עם חבריו, הבית עליו יצא להגן בגבורה עילאית ובחירוף נפש. באותו יום מר ונמהר. הבית שלו, הבית שלנו, של כולנו.
Also, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke at the funeral. He started by mourning the last hostage, honoring Gvili in his moments of burial, but also reminded the crowd of the road ahead. Take a listen.
אנחנו דבקים גם ביעדינו האחרים. לפרק את החמאס מנשקו, לפרז את הרצועה, וגם את זה נשיג. ידעו מבקשי נפשנו, שמי שמניף יד על ישראל ישלם מחיר כבד מנשוא.
Ron Gvili will forever remain a symbol of pure Zionism and dedication to the state and the people of Israel, the first to enter the battle and the last to leave. May his memory forever be a blessing. And the U.S. military is fully stationed in the region with a military Air Force exercise drill already planned and announced by CENTCOM to boost readiness and mobility. In the last hour, Trump tweeted this, saying, quote, "A massive armada is heading to Iran, sending a clear threat to Tehran, negotiate a fair and proper deal or suffer an attack greater than the last." Interestingly, Trump reiterated the issue of nuclear weapons, adding that the time is running out. And the IDF are now saying that they eliminated a terrorist who approached troops stationed near the Yellow Line in Gaza, posing an immediate threat to troops. Soldiers on the ground identified the threat, ordered Air Force airstrikes, and eliminated the threat. This is yet another ceasefire violation by the terror group, which is seeking to now integrate 40,000 of its members, including 10,000 Hamas police officers, into the technocratic Gaza government. Israel quickly rejected this request, insisting that reconstruction must follow demilitarization and disarmament of Hamas. And before we go for now, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code that's on your screen. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel in the heart of the Middle East. I'm Diva Klein. Thank you so much for watching this edition of ILTV on the Hour, and I hope to see you again very soon.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Caleb Ben David, and coming up in today's newscast. As U.S. forces build up around Iran, Trump offers the regime a last chance to talk. With Ron Gvili's return, Israel okays reopening the Rafah crossing as Phase 2 proceeds. Azerbaijan arrests 3 suspected of planning an attack on the Israeli embassy in Baku. Israel awoke to a new reality today. For the first time in years, there are no Israelis being held hostage in Gaza. Following yesterday's return of the body of Master Sergeant Ron Gvili, he was the last Israeli held captive in Gaza from the October 7th terror attack. We'll have more on that later. But first, some major developing news. The U.S. is building up its military presence in the region as Trump and his advisors weigh all possible actions to take against the Islamic regime in Iran. More on this from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The United States continues its military buildup in the region ahead of a possible action against the Islamic regime in Iran. The USS aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln and its accompanying strike force is reportedly now in Mideast waters within striking distance of Iran. President Trump and his closest advisors are still weighing their next steps and waiting to see if the Iranian regime is prepared to negotiate with Washington on its terms. The New York Times reporting today that Trump has received multiple intelligence reports indicating that the Ayatollah's regime is now at its weakest point since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, after weeks of street protests and a brutal crackdown in which security forces gunned down and arrested tens of thousands of demonstrators. In an interview with Axios, Trump said that Iran wants to make a deal and has called on numerous occasions to do so, after he sent, quote, an armada bigger than the U.S. deployed against Venezuela. But the regime publicly still remains defiant, with top officials threatening total war against the US and Israel if it is attacked. Within Iran, the regime continues its brutal campaign against dissenters, with reports that security forces have been entering hospitals to drag protesters who were injured during the demonstrations out of their sickbeds.
Absolutely. I've been receiving many reports of security forces, including plainclothes security forces going into hospitals to identify protesters, but also to detain them. And I think, and that has been reported, again, not just in one province, but in multiple provinces. And I think this creates a really chilling effect. I mean, medical facilities needs to be a safe place for everyone. And I think what this is happening as a result of this is that wounded protesters are choosing not to seek medical attention. And I think that would inevitably result in further deaths and injuries that really need to be treated.
Meanwhile, Israel continues to prepare for an Iranian retaliation following a potential U.S. strike. The tourism ministry has announced that it has a plan to quickly evacuate some 42,000 tourists currently in Israel if the Iranians should strike, as Israelis prepare to hunker down for another possible conflict.
Now, a moment of closure for Israel. The IDF has confirmed that the remains of Ran Gvili, the last hostage from October 7th, have been found and identified and returned to Israel for burial. Gvili was killed in battle during the Hamas attacks and abducted into Gaza. His recovery ends the final unresolved case from that day. ILTV's India Naftali is at Hostages Square with all the details. India?
Thank you, Kalev. I'm standing here at Hostages Square. It's a place that's become a symbol of pain, waiting, and hope for more than 2 years. I've been reporting from the square since the first weeks after October 7th, and today, for the very first time in over a decade, Israel has no remaining hostages in Gaza. People are removing their yellow hostage pins. Many vowed to keep them on until everyone came home, and that moment finally came with the return of Ran Gvili. The Israel Defense Forces confirmed Monday that the remains of 24-year-old police officer Ran Gvili have been identified and returned to Israel for burial. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum called him first to enter, last to return. On October 7th, Ran Gvili rushed into battle, fighting at the entrance to Kibbutz Halomim until his ammunition ran out. The recovery operation for his body, named Courageous Heart, was based on precise intelligence that his body was buried in a cemetery in eastern Gaza City. New details released by the Shin Bet revealed that the breakthrough came after a Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative was captured and interrogated last month. He admitted to moving Gvili's body between locations and provided information that led to the exact burial site. Forensic teams examined nearly 250 bodies before identifying Gvili's remains. Prime Minister Netanyahu announced his return yesterday.
אני שמח לבשר לאזרחי ישראל, לעם ישראל, כפי שבישרתי עכשיו, למשפחת גבילי, כוחותינו מצאו את רני, והוא כרגע בדרך הביתה. זה הישג בלתי רגיל של מדינת ישראל. אנחנו הבטחנו, אני הבטחתי, להחזיר את כולם. החזרנו את כולם, עד האחרון שבהם. רני, גיבור ישראל, נכנס ראשון, יצא אחרון, הוא שב הביתה. הישג כביר לצבא ההגנה לישראל, למדינת ישראל, וגם לאזרחי ישראל, שאתם נתתם לנו את הגיבוי להשלים את המלאכה. רני חוזר הביתה.
Now that he is home, all of Israel is reacting, particularly his family, who has long awaited him.
I want to say thank you to President Trump and Witkoff and Kushner and Bibi Netanyahu, of course. They promised me to bring my son home, and they bring him home.
Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir personally called Ran Gvili's family. And the military also released video from the moment soldiers found Gvili's body. They stood together, sang, and said a prayer. Kalev, this may be one of the last times I speak to you from Hostages Square. Just talking to the people here in Israel, there is a huge sense of joy and relief, but also sorrow that Ran Gvili couldn't come home alive. It's been a huge honor and privilege to be able to report on this historic moment. Back to you.
Well, India, thank you for last time from Hostages Square. And with the return of the final Israeli hostage, Ron Vili, to Israel, the Rafah crossing can now be opened and Trump's phase 2 of his Gaza plan can commence. Israel has agreed to a partial reopening of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, but said it will continue to monitor remotely all people and goods passing through it. Speaking with the Axios news site, President Trump praised Hamas for what he said was its cooperation in helping locate the body of Ron Vili. But he also stressed the terror group must now lay down its weapons in accordance with the U.S. brokered peace agreement, saying now we have to disarm Hamas like they promised. A senior U.S. official also told reporters that those Hamas terrorists who agree to lay down their arms will be granted amnesty as per the peace deal, and that reconstruction of the Gaza Strip will only begin with the demilitarization of the territory. The official added that Israel will be expected to carry out a full withdrawal from Gaza as that process takes place, though Israeli officials have said they expect that would only happen after Hamas is fully disarmed. Well, joining us now for more on that and other issues is Reserves Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Doron Avital, former commander of IDF Special Forces, and Reserves IDF Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich, now director of the AJC Israel, and she's a former IDF spokesperson to the international media. Avital, let me start with you, the return of Ron Vili, a sense of closure for Israel, but in also opening a new chapter for the country as it deals with what's happening in Gaza. So I just want to address to you, and looking forward now, what is Israel going to have to be especially focused on in Gaza now that the hostages are back?
Right. So obviously yesterday was a day full of joy, sadness too, because Ron Vili unfortunately returned in a coffin, but a little bit of satisfaction of the fact that all the hostages are back and there are no more hostages in Gaza since 2014. Now, having said that, we are looking at the next phase, which is right around the corner. And if I'm reading Trump's peace plan, demilitarization, it's one of the points. Basically, what it says is that all military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons productions, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. And the big question that now in Israel is being discussed is who will be responsible for that demilitarization, because obviously the big price for Hamas would be the rebuilding, the renovating of Gaza. And that will not happen until this part of disarming takes place. It is unclear at this point who will lead the disarming, because we know that in Kiryat Gat, in the center, which the American CENTCOM has opened, there are representatives from 27 different countries. So far, until this point, none of these representatives of countries has agreed and said, we will be boots on the ground, we will be the ones disarming Hamas. So without this critical point, I don't see how we will make any progress on the second phase.
Well, Doron, I want you to pick up on that. And also, there is a sense coming now from some of the U.S. officials, not from President Trump, that perhaps they will be trying to do a thing where there'll be some kind of partial disarming, or the process of demilitarization will begin, and Israel will then also be expected, for example, to start already pulling back from the so-called yellow line in Gaza, maybe, and this could be problematic for Israel. So how, especially on that aspect, how should it react to, say, that proposal?
Listen, we have to understand the logic that they are trying to employ here, to apply here, the logic of Trump. We call it in military lingo, it's like a buffer logic. You just set a constraint one after the other. And of course, the second constraint, the first constraint was live hostages, the end of the war. And the second, in terms of the demilitarization, will be, first of all, the happy weaponry. Because, once happy weaponry is deposited wherever in Egypt, whatever would be the case, then the distinction between who is a policeman and who is a military man starts to fade. So I think that's the way they think about the logic, the Trump administration, when they talk about this partial resolution of the constraints as they go. In the end, of course, we have to see the tunnels dismantled. For us, this is critical, because you have to understand, if there was an operative surprise, I'm not talking about the intelligence debacle, but I mean, in terms of a surprise, was the fact that you have this different layer of combat that you have to handle with the tunnels. So we can't have those tunnels existing in Gaza City, in all those areas, and dismantling them is part of this demilitarization of Gaza. So heavy weaponry, dismantling of the tunnels, and then what's the next phase is of course connected to who would be the force on the ground that will take control on the civil life, on the security of the citizens and so on. And this would be tricky for Israel and tricky in general.
Right, that's a big question. I want to move on to Iran now. Avital, I won't try to ask you to read President Trump's mind, which is very difficult, if not impossible. But just based on the latest comments we're hearing out of Washington and Tehran, do you think we're leaning toward action or to some kind of negotiation?
Well, to predict something that President Trump will do is a big risk, I would say. However, I'm reading in between the lines and I'm also hearing the music. And the music says that there's a lot of American forces here in the region that have been mobilized from other locations. For example, the Indo-Pacific after the operation in Venezuela, and also from other areas as well. If I'm also further zooming out, I'm looking at the countries surrounding Israel, then I see additional American forces in Jordan, in Bahrain, and other countries as well. So basically, what President Trump is trying to convey is that we are here, we have the full power, we're ready to act, but. Now, the question of the but can go a few ways. One but can go to a full military action, attack, operation in Iran. But here, we are not clear about the goal. While Israel's ultimate vision, I would say, with Iran is to take down the regime, I'm not sure the American has the same kind of goal. The second but can also go to a negotiation, because we heard recently Witkoff saying that he texts often with the foreign minister of Iran, exchanging messages about a possible negotiation, a possible discussion. So both buts are currently on the table. But one thing is clear. Should the American choose to launch a major operation in Gaza towards the Revolutionary Guards...
I'm sorry, towards Iran. Towards Iran.
Iran. Yeah.
Towards Iran, of course, then they're ready. They have the capabilities, they're ready. In the meantime, until this happens, I have to say, Kalev, I'm surprised at the sleepiness I see all over the world with watching the horrible pictures from Iran. I mean, I think that the Western countries, wherever they are, should expel immediately the Iranian ambassadors from their territory following this very murderous attack we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks in Iran.
Right, certainly it's horrific. Doron, if Iran does retaliate against Israel, and it's clearly said it will, how far should Israel go? Should it go all out in the hopes, perhaps, of weakening the regime and aiding the U.S. to perhaps seeing it toppled?
I don't think the game against Iran is run by Israel right now. It's run by the U.S. So basically, we have to be at sync with the U.S. in terms of every move that we make. And of course, we don't need to go into any preemptive attacks. But of course, we have to be very prepared to be attacked in case President Trump decides to act. And then, of course, if the U.S. would ask us to participate, of course, we can do it. But I don't think they will in this context right now. I want to remind us the Gulf War of the 90s, early 90s, the same scenario when Iraq is being attacked, the missiles are shot into Israel, and then we were not allowed to participate. Me as a deputy commander of the unit, I wasn't allowed to participate in preempting those launchers from Iraq. So I would think the game is run by the US. This is a clear case. And we have to play along and see what's up. Of course, everybody wants to see the regime change. We and the US. The question is what kind of active steps we can take, what kind of attack, if there will be an attack, would be deployed, would it be an enormous attack, would it be a targeted attack, what would be the consequences? And of course, we have also to take into account that things can be a chain reaction that we can't foresee. So it's a gamble. It's a very serious gamble and a very major decision that the US President have to make.
All right, some fateful days ahead. Avital Leibovich, Doron Avital, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you.
And we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel, breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code on your screen to join.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kolel Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kolel Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help, and you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at U Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At U Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
Three citizens were detained today in Baku after Azerbaijani security forces foiled a planned terror attack targeting the Israeli embassy there. This a day after Foreign Minister Gideon Saar's visit to the site. The suspects were reportedly linked to an ISIS terror cell in Azerbaijan, according to local security officials. The three were arrested as they approached the area of the embassy while preparing to carry out an attack motivated by religious hostility. The exact timing of the arrest was not disclosed, though authorities said the operation took place recently. The investigation is still ongoing. Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and among the events taking place is a global gathering in Jerusalem, warning that anti-Semitism is once again a threat to Jews and the free world. ILTV's Lidar Grav Lazi is co-hosting the second day of the conference, and our Mayan Hoffman was there yesterday and filed this report.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu walked on stage in Jerusalem last night with a warning and a challenge, saying a World War Jew ideology is now targeting the Jewish people and the Western world at large.
And they agree on one thing. What is the thing that they agree on? World War Jew. To conduct a world war, first against the Jews and against the Jewish state.
Netanyahu spoke Monday night at a gala marking the opening of the second International Conference on Combating Anti-Semitism, a two-day event bringing hundreds of leaders, lawmakers, diplomats, and civil society figures from around the world to Jerusalem. The conference, initiated by Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism Minister Amichai Shikli, comes as Jewish communities worldwide face the highest levels of anti-Semitism seen since the Holocaust. Events continued Tuesday, International Holocaust Remembrance Day, with panels and closed sessions at the Jerusalem International Convention Center. At the heart of Monday night's gala was a special government award presented to Leo Terrell, senior counsel and chair of the U.S. Department of Justice Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism.
It's not a game, it's not a play. You are fighting with your soul, with all your heart. And I think the entire Jewish people and the people here in Israel, we all can feel your heart beating with us.
Terrell, speaking at a press conference ahead of the ceremony, said his commitment to the fight is both personal and long-term.
Fighting anti-Semitism is not a Jewish issue. It's not an American issue. It's a Western civilization issue.
Terrell, a civil rights attorney for more than 3 decades, said he was asked by U.S. President Donald Trump to leave Fox News and take on the role, with a clear mandate to use every legal tool available to combat anti-Semitism. In response to a question from ILTV about the line between free speech and incitement, Terrell stressed that words become a federal issue when they turn into action.
Speech alone without criminal or misconduct, it's not illegal. So you're asking me that hate crime speech leads to crime. If a crime is committed with words and conduct, the Trump administration will take the appropriate legal action.
The conference was not just about statements, but about building connections between countries dealing with similar threats. Participants met earlier on Monday at the Knesset, discussing legislation, education, foreign interference, and the need for coordinated responses to incitement and violence.
To connect in between those leaders from Cyprus to Romania, Albania, Italia, Canada, Australia, all together to have a discussion like we had today in the Knesset, so people get to know one another, and we are building networks.
Others said the fact that so many leaders gathered in Jerusalem was a sign of momentum.
It's kind of the worst nightmare for the anti-Semites around the world, because we're actually sitting together, conspiring together for good.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland.
And let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 10 degrees Celsius or 51 degrees Fahrenheit. But tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures with highs of 15 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. It's at ILTV Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Caleb Ben David. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Good Week Israel, the show where we recap for you some of the positive highlights coming out of Israel from this week. I'm your host, Diva Klein, and coming up on today's show, Israel selects its Eurovision representative for 2026. ILTV participates in the IAC conference in Miami. And a heartwarming display from one former hostage to the only one remaining. Hey there, let's open with Eurovision 2026. The competition itself is in quite a while. It takes place all the way in May, but Israel's journey in selecting its representative has already wrapped up. Let me introduce an Israeli reality TV show called HaKochav Haba. It's a singing contest where the winner goes on to represent Israel at the Eurovision Song Contest. All of Israel's latest entries have been selected from this very competition, so needless to say, this show is a big deal here in Israel, especially those keeping up with Eurovision. But as we know from previous years for Israel, this contest is not just about singing. It's about resilience, bravery, and composure in the face of hatred and anti-Semitism, those who think Israel does not deserve to compete like everyone else. Representing Israel on the Eurovision stage has transformed into a much bigger, more demanding task, not just artistically, but emotionally and mentally. So with that, let's have a look at the winner of Kochav Haba and Israel's Eurovision representative for 2026, Noam Betan.
אנחנו הרבה אהבה לנציג ישראל האירוויזיון באוסטריה, נועם בטן!
Tu me sauves de l'enfer, tu me laisses un goût d'encore dans la vie et dans la peine. וניצחתי הכל.
Noam Bitan, a French-Israeli singer-songwriter and creator, was already a favorite to win this season of Kochav Haba from the moment he entered our screens. Born in Ra'anana, central Israel to French immigrants, Noam's musical journey started at a very young age. Beating 3 other contestants on one of the show's most competitive seasons, Bitan's history with Kochav Haba does not start in 2026.
Formidable. Tu étais formidable.
7 years ago, a 17-year-old Noam would audition for the 5th ever season of Kochav Haba, and although his talent was palpable, judges passed on him and he did not advance. This year, Bitan proved himself with his pop grunge style with heavy French influence, lyricism, and brassy vocals that stole the hearts of the audience. But as Eurovision becomes a more hostile environment for Israel, the selection of Noam Bitan is incredibly relevant. Returning to the stage he was once rejected from, and taking every moment with stride, confidence, and brass, proved to the Israeli public that Noam has what it takes and is a fighter. This is Israel's 2026 representative for the Eurovision Song Contest, and despite winning the show, his dream journey to Eurovision begins now.
מרגיש מדהים, אני גאה להיות פה, אני שמח להיות פה. אני מעריך את המקום הזה כל כך, חיכיתי לזה המון שנים. אין מאושר ממני, מודה לאלוהים, מודה לקהל בבית שבחר בי. המסר שלי לאירופה זה שתתכוננו, אנחנו יכולים להביא שיר טירוף, אנחנו יכולים להביא את כל מה שיש לנו, אנחנו יכולים להביא אור ואהבה ולאחד ולשמוח, הגיע הזמן. לתת קצת טוב ואור וזה כל מה שיש לי לתת, באמת, אני רוצה רק את זה. אני בעולם הזה כדי לעשות מוזיקה, זה מה שלג נתן לי, אני בא לעשות את זה. כל השאר זה לא יודע, זה חוקי אירוויזיון, זה עניינים, אני לא מתעסק בזה, אני בא לעשות מוזיקה ובא לעשות טוב בעולם ולהעיר.
And in an emotional display at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, former hostage Agam Berger joined the rally organized by the family of the final Israeli hostage Ran Gvili. In a heartwarming moment, the former hostage got on stage and played a special song for Ran on her violin. Have a look.
Hundreds gathered Friday evening at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv for a Shabbat service demanding the return of the last remaining hostage body still held in Gaza, that of slain police officer Master Sergeant Ran Gvili. Speaking to the crowd, Ran's father, Itzik, said the family draws strength from the unity on display, saying people from right and left have come together as one big family, just as his son dreamed. The gathering culminated in a powerful moment as former hostage Agam Berger took the stage playing the song Habaita, Homeward, on the violin. Berger said she may have returned home a year ago, but Israel will not truly be home until Ran Gvili returns.
And ILTV was proud to participate in one of the most important conferences for Jewry in North America. That is the IAC conference in Miami, Florida. Have a look at what went down.
Well, over the weekend, an important summit brought together key figures from Jewish and American backgrounds to discuss geopolitics, the rise of anti-Semitism, and the fight against it. ILTV was at the Israeli-American Council National Summit in Florida. Let's go now to our correspondent, Libby Alon, who was at the event.
Yes, Emily, good evening. I am here in Florida at the IAC event, one of the largest gatherings in the United States. More than 4,000 people came from across the country to show their support for the strong connection between Israel and the United States. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Special Envoy Yehuda Kaplu and Miriam Edelson, and many others were here to speak. ILTV had the privilege of being on the ground, listening, speaking, and interviewing some of the most influential voices in the room. This is what it looks like during the weekend.
This past weekend in Miami was a true celebration of Jewish identity and community. More than 4,000 Jews from across the United States gathered for the IAC conference, an event dedicated to strengthening the ties between Israel and the United States and reinforcing Jewish identity.
I remember when President Trump and I were talking, Steve Witkoff was in the room, and we were talking about Iran. And I said, the one comment I said, if we're ever going to take action, I want to phone a friend, and that friend is Israel. Because of the capability and the friendship that we have with them, and Israel has very unique capabilities.
The conference featured prominent speakers and influencers from around the world, Special Envoy Yuda Kaplan, philanthropist Dr. Miriam Adelson, and others, who discussed the challenges ahead and ways to strengthen the bond between Jewish communities and Israel.
Global anti-Semitism is on the rise. How we combat it is part of what was said before about having a cohesive strategy. The battle is, we're fighting it. We are not tolerating one issue of anti-Semitism. The president has made it clear, and for those of you who don't know, on Monday he said anti-Semitism has no place in America.
The conference also addressed key geopolitical issues. U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff spoke about Iran, revealing that at President Trump's direction, the U.S. contacted Iran officials to express concern over report of mass execution of anti-regime protesters.
President Trump warned the Iranians, and at his direction, we communicated with the Iranians yesterday, and one of the things we were concerned about were the killings that were rumored to be on the way. Hangings, mass hangings, and that's been shut down. I think, as everyone knows, the president has announced that. He's the only one in the world who has that indomitable strength that can bend people. I watch it happen. It's quite remarkable to watch it happen.
The people of Iran clearly want that regime gone. What would you say to them?
I'd say to them, they're incredibly courageous people, and we stand with you.
The Trump administration was strongly represented with Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Hermit Ilan, emphasizing their commitment to fighting anti-Semitism and strengthening ties with Israel.
I believe that quite a bit of what we're seeing online and in our universities and attacks on our houses of worship is funded by foreign governments and foreign evil actors, and that is definitely a focus of this administration, to trace the money and understand who's funding it, because that's critical to stopping it.
God bless you. We will continue to fight for Israel. Shabbat Shalom.
The IAC conference once again proved to be a powerful platform, strengthening Jewish identity and the enduring bond between Israel and American Jewry.
And speaking of the connection between Israel and the United States, well, what greater partnership to point at than that of our great leaders, of course, President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who have proved time and again that the bond between Israel and the United States leads both countries to opportunities of greatness. The Israeli Prime Minister actually posted a congratulations video in honor of the president's first full year back in office. Take a look.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated U.S. President Donald Trump on marking 1 year since returning to office for his second term. In a post on the official Prime Minister's X account, Netanyahu called it an incredible first year of a second term, offering congratulations to both President Trump and the United States. The two leaders have maintained close ties, meeting face-to-face 6 times since Trump began his second term, most recently just weeks ago in Florida.
From the Golan Heights to Gaza, you've proven time and again what I've said many times.
We've never had a friend, even close, a friend, as President Trump in the White House. So I think we have a partnership, if I can quote you, second to none. I think it's allowed us to do enormous things.
While you focus at home on making America great again, your leadership abroad is changing the world for the better, ending wars and advancing peace.
I think what President Trump has done in a very short time is bring America back to the front seat, to the driver's seat in world affairs, and that's very, very important.
I think he's been extraordinary in his friendship and his support for Israel, his principled positions, his willingness to just cut through and get to the essence of things.
Israel with other people might not exist right now, if you want to know the truth.
The coordination between an American president and an Israeli prime minister has been unmatched. It offers great promise for Israel, for America, for our region, and for the world.
We're with you, and we'll continue to be with you, and a lot of good things are happening.
Thank you for your friendship.
Thank you very much, baby.
And thank you for your support. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, there are more diplomatic ties worth mentioning, like that of Honduras, the Central American nation whose president-elect just visited Israel and the prime minister in a show of strengthening bonds and enduring ties. Have a look.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met in Jerusalem with Honduran President-elect Nasrito Asfura, signaling a push to deepen ties between the two countries. Asfura, a conservative businessman and former mayor, was elected on a platform focusing on economic stability, infrastructure, and strong relations with the United States and its allies. Honduras has been one of Israel's closest partners in Central America, regularly supporting Israel in international forums and maintaining warm diplomatic and security ties for decades. The country previously moved its embassy to Jerusalem, a step seen in Israel as a major diplomatic gesture. Netanyahu said Israel and Honduras are refashioning their relationship, highlighting cooperation in economy, agriculture, and technology, and telling the president-elect that as far as Israel is concerned, the sky is the limit. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar also hosted President-elect Asfura at the Foreign Ministry during his visit, saying he's certain that under Asfura's leadership, Honduras will once again be one of Israel's close friends and allies, and pledging Israel's support in strengthening bilateral ties after 4 years of leftist rule in the country.
I welcome you in Jerusalem. It's an ancient city, but it's also a city that looks forward to innovation and to cooperation with you and the people of Honduras. I look forward to working with your government, both in economic fields, in agriculture, in technology, in any of the areas that I think are laid before us. You should know that as far as Israel is concerned, the sky's the limit.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias, primer ministro. Estoy seguro que todo lo que usted dijo lo vamos a poder hacer juntos para Israel y Honduras y tener esas relaciones estrechas para las próximas décadas, trabajar por la paz, por la amistad, por un futuro, por una América más unida, más democrática, con paz, trabajo y esperanza. Estoy seguro de eso.
And we have one more example of international cooperation for you, but this time with a twist. It's not just diplomatic ties Greece is after with Israel, but full-scale military and tech cooperation, as both countries now face the growing regional threat of Turkey. The Mediterranean countries are now siding with one another and boosting each other's capabilities in return. Have a look.
Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz praised the strong and growing security alliance between Israel and Greece. Speaking Tuesday at a joint press conference with Greek Defense Minister Nikos Dendias in Athens, Katz said operational cooperation between the two countries is expanding and described joint military exercises as a force multiplier that strengthens the security systems of both Israel and Greece. Dendias confirmed the two sides will cooperate on anti-drone technology and cybersecurity, including sharing know-how to counter drone swarms and unmanned undersea vehicles. Last year, Greece approved the purchase of 36 Israeli-made pulse rockets artillery systems worth about 650 million euros, and is also in talks with Israel on a multi-layer air, missile, and drone defense system estimated at 3 billion euros. While no threats were named, both countries view Turkey as a key regional security challenge.
Μελετήσαμε το Ισραηλινό μοντέλο και επί τη βάση αυτού δημιουργήσαμε το Ελληνικό Κέντρο Αμυντικής Καινοτομίας. Στόχος μας είναι η Ελλάδα, από μια χώρα πελάτης και αγοραστής μόνο αμυντικών συστημάτων, να γίνει μια χώρα συμπαραγωγός, παραγωγός καινοτόμων προϊόντων, χαμηλού σχετικά κόστους και διπλής χρήσης.
כחלק בלתי נפרד מהשותפות הזאת, אנו חולקים מידע רלוונטי, מקדמים שיתוף פעולה ביטחוני, טכנולוגי, מקיימים תרגילים ואימונים משותפים, ומחזקים את שיתוף הפעולה המבצעי, וכל אלה מהווים מכפיל כוח משמעותי למערכות הביטחון, הן בישראל והן ביוון. בד בבד אנחנו נחושים גם בסוגיה קריטית נוספת, לא לאפשר לגורמים המבקשים לערער את היציבות האזורית לבסס דריסת רגל באמצעות טרור, תוקפנות או שלוחות צבאיות בסוריה, בעזה, בים האגאי או בכל זירה אחרת לממש את שאיפותיהם המסוכנים.
And finally, with the amount of misinformation on social media, it is crucial to have your facts in line. Many are using the Talmud, which is a sacred religious text, to excuse anti-Semitism, using the text as a source of the violence and cruelty that lies within Judaism. Only these claims are preposterous and completely wrong, and often stem from a misreading of these holy texts. So to get your facts straight and clear yourself to defend Judaism and the Talmud, take a listen to this interview with Rabbi Daniel Rowe on how to debunk the lies.
Now, from social media influencers to online podcasters, false and inflammatory claims about the Talmud are once again circulating widely. Joining us now in studio is Rabbi Daniel Rowe, who is taking on these accusations head on and explaining why they're both false and dangerous. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
So, Rabbi Rowe, we're seeing a sudden wave of online attacks claiming that the Talmud promotes immoral or violent behavior. What is actually happening right now in the digital space, and why did you feel it was urgent to respond?
Yeah, so it seems that since October 7th, there's been this wave of attempts to attack Israel, attack Jewish people, and one of them has been about the religion. Like, we saw it when Netanyahu gave a speech a few weeks after October 7th and said the phrase, "Remember what Amalek did," which every Jew recognizes. It means never forget when we're attacked. But anti-people latch on that and say, oh, he's referring to Samuel chapter 15 when they went to war against Amalek and is genocidal. The same thing's happening with Talmud. They're going to old quotes that have been long debunked, trying to cherry pick them, stick them all over social media and say secretly these Jewish people are into killing non-Jews and hating non-Jews. I felt the need to respond when people started reaching out to me, Jews and allies who say we can defend Israel, but we don't know how to defend this. We don't know the Talmud. Right. And so now I put out a bunch of videos that people can use as a resource to know what's really going on and where these are false and made up and so on, or where they're just out of context or whatever it is.
It seems so ridiculous, but so important to do this. So now you show that many of these accusations are not new at all, but actually recycled, like you say, recycled medieval polemics that were already debunked centuries ago, like you say. Why do you think these fabrications keep resurfacing? And why are they so effective in today's social media environment?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, the real story is crazy. It's 1871. There was a Vienna professor called August Rohling. He literally published a thing called the Talmudic Jew. He ended up in a court case against the rabbi called Rabbi Bloch, and the court didn't know what to do. They appointed two Christian experts who spent 2 years researching, found it was all either fake or out of context. Rohling withdrew, he lost his job, but it was always recycling. Julius Streicher was Hitler's big minister of information. He loved these quotes because it's so easy. A quote, it sounds sincere, sounds real, makes Jews look terrible. After World War II, it went into kind of the Nazi circles, the edge of the web. Since the war began, they've been thrown, whether it's Qatari funding or bots or who knows what, this is like moved in heavily in. And yeah, they're so effective because you believe a quote. It says that sometimes even the line, if you look it up, is actually a true line. Just the context is nothing to do with what it sounds like. So they're extremely effective on social media, and they're playing into this narrative of the Jewish monsters.
And so beyond correcting the bad information, what are real-world dangers? What are the dangers that these distortions pose when they frame Jews as following these secret or perverse laws? What does that mean for broader conversations about anti-Semitism?
Yeah, it absolutely plays into anti-Semitic narratives. The truth is, even if they weren't there, this stuff of the Jews like looking nice on the surface, but secretly having this malicious intent is always at the center of anti-Semitic tales. So this just feeds into that. And yes, it's extremely dangerous. It can lead to, apart from demonization of Israel, it can lead to violence against Jews all over the world.
Now, you argue that these attacks often present themselves as ideological critiques rather than anti-Semitism. Why is that distinction misleading? And how should journalists and viewers recognize the difference?
Yeah, so first of all, anti-Semitism is typically like, oh, if we're not racist against Jews, like, I wouldn't, I defend your right to keep your religion, then I can't be anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic is this kind of social pathology of Jew demonization. And this stuff is the perfect weapon of Jew demonization. You see, you can't attack the Bible because Christians believe in the Bible, but you can attack the Talmud, and most people never read it, don't know it. And so journalists or anyone just seeing this stuff online should find people who know what they're talking about. Don't take our word for it, but allow us to walk you through. First of all, you'll find about a third of the quotes are literally made up nonsense. Another third are just radically out of context, like literally, there's a line, for example, that in the middle of the Egyptians pursuing the Israelites into the sea, a rabbi says the best of them should be killed. Take that line out of context, the best of all non-Jews should be killed. It's absurd, but you need to see the context. Then you need to see Talmud is extremely complex, right? Large, you can debate something for pages. You could literally have a hypothesis that's rejected. There's a very famous one. There's a hypothesis, could it be okay to steal from a non-Jew? And it's rejected. But if you take the hypothesis, so let somebody show you through, let's see them what's really going on, and almost all of these will just dissolve. Judaism is a religion that believes in the value of all human beings. The Talmud says all human beings are created in the image of God and are beloved. That's what we believe. And the attempt to demonize us is a part of this broader attempt to paint Jews as demons.
Well, Rabbi Rowe, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And that's all for today's Good Week Israel. I hope we've helped to deliver some positive news that you get to now take with you into this week ahead. As always, I am Deborah Klein. Take care. Thank you so much for watching.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at U Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At U Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
As people around the world celebrate the holiday season, one Israeli program is bringing real light to children who have known darkness. Tonight, ILTV's Mayan Hoffman brings us the story of Kfir Sabag, a young man whose life was transformed.
The holiday season is about light breaking through darkness, about hope when things feel uncertain. For World Emuna's Neve Michael Children's Village, that message is lived every single day. Kfir Sabag was just 10 years old when his life changed forever.
I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 21 years ago in 2004. I am 10 years old and my little brother was 7. It was a difficult moment.
After losing their mother and father, Kfir and his younger brother were sent to Neve Michael, an Emunah children's home created to give vulnerable children stability, safety, and a future. For Kfir, it became something even more personal.
I very love this place. It's my home, it's my family.
Neve Michael is part of World Emunah's broader mission, building Israeli society by supporting children who come from broken or unstable homes and giving them the tools to succeed. For Kfir, the impact was life-changing.
I feel loved. These people in this place is my mother, and my father, and the Bnot Sherutis was my big sisters.
With the support of Neve Michael, Kfir became the first in his family to graduate from university. He went on to earn a master's degree with honors, serve as an outstanding combat soldier, and build a family of his own. But his story does not end there. Today, Kfir has returned to Neve Michael, not as a child in need, but as a leader and mentor for the next generation.
Every morning I up in my bed and I happy. I talk with the children, I talk with the people in this place, and I say thank you to God.
He now serves as Neve Michael's children's group coordinator, helping children who are walking the same path that he once did.
A lot of people help me, and today I help the other people, the other children, the other teenager.
For World Emunah, this is what success looks like. Children who grow up, build strong lives, and make sure the next generation never needs the same help that they once did. This holiday, as candles are lit across Israel and around the world, Neve Michael is proof that light does not just flicker, it multiplies. Because when you change one child's life, you help build the future of Israel itself.
Back to ILTV on the hour. I'm Diva Klein coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. The funeral procession of Master Sergeant Ran Gvili is taking place now in Kibbutz Alumim in southern Israel. Policemen and women line the streets, saluting the convoy carrying the body of the slain hostage, paying their final respects to the former Yassam Special Unit officer. Gvili was returned for burial in Israel after 843 days in Hamas captivity. Attending his funeral were Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, members of his coalition, President Herzog and his wife, security officials, military personnel, and Israel police, and massive crowds of Israelis. Israelis who looked at Ran as a symbol, Israelis who resonated with his story and waited so patiently for his return. Talik, Gvili's mother, mourned her fallen son, but also sent words of strength. Take a listen.
רן תדאג שם מלמעלה, לאחד את כולם, כי אני פה, למטה, קצת דואגת. רן תבקש מהרוגי המלכות להתאחד, לשלוח כוח לכל עם ישראל, לחזק את החיילים ואת השוטרים שלנו, כי אנחנו עדיין במשימה לחסל את האויבים. חמאס, ג'יהאד, טרוריסטים מזוהמים, ניסיתם להפחיד אותנו. ניסיתם להבהיל את עם ישראל. תראו מה נשאר ממכם. חכו.
Speaking at the funeral, President Isaac Herzog reminded the crowd of the sheer bravery of Ran Gvili and his valiant effort to fight for our homeland. Let's hear the clip.
אנחנו עומדים כאן היום בשעה קדושה, שוברת לב, שבה רני הגיבור והאהוב, החטוף האחרון, מובא סוף סוף למנוחת עולמים באדמת הבית. הבית אותו אהב, הבית שלמענו נלחם יחד עם חבריו, הבית עליו יצא להגן בגבורה עילאית ובחירוף נפש. באותו יום מר ונמהר. הבית שלו, הבית שלנו, של כולנו.
Also, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke at the funeral. He started by mourning the last hostage, honoring Gvili in his moments of burial, but also reminded the crowd of the road ahead. Take a listen.
אנחנו דבקים גם ביעדינו האחרים, לפרק את החמאס מנשקו
לפרז את הרצועה, וגם את זה נשיג. ידעו מבקשי נפשנו שמי שמניף יד על ישראל ישלם מחיר כבד מנשוא.
Ron Gvili will forever remain a symbol of pure Zionism and dedication to the state and the people of Israel, the first to enter the battle and the last to leave. May his memory forever be a blessing. And the U.S. military is fully stationed in the region with a military Air Force exercise drill already planned and announced by CENTCOM to boost readiness and mobility. In the last hour, Trump tweeted this, saying, quote, "A massive armada is heading to Iran, sending a clear threat to Tehran, negotiate a fair and proper deal or suffer an attack greater than the last." Interestingly, Trump reiterated the issue of nuclear weapons, adding that the time is running out. And the IDF are now saying that they eliminated a terrorist who approached troops stationed near the Yellow Line in Gaza, posing an immediate threat to troops. Soldiers on the ground identified the threat, ordered Air Force airstrikes, and eliminated the threat. This is yet another ceasefire violation by the terror group, which is seeking to now integrate 40,000 of its members, including 10,000 Hamas police officers, into the technocratic Gaza government. Israel quickly rejected this request, insisting that reconstruction must follow demilitarization and disarmament of Hamas. And before we go for now, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code that's on your screen. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. I'm Diva Klein. Thank you so much for watching this edition of ILTV on the Hour, and I hope to see you again very soon.
They have not stopped slaughtering the protesters in Iran. It has not quieted down. That's a lie. It's up to Trump, and Trump promised that he was coming, and he better make good on that. We always end up getting bitten in the ass every time we play that. Oh, yes, well, diplomacy, you just have to be pragmatic. Sometimes no, okay? We heard that with deals with Hitler as well. Sorry, it doesn't work. Imagine owning your own luxury apartment in the heart of Jerusalem. The Dream Raffle is making that possible with a $1.2 million fully furnished apartment as the grand prize. And right now, there's one final bonus round. Purchase tickets by February 2nd, and you'll be entered into a raffle for a $15,000 cash prize. Click the link below and buy your tickets today.
Shalom and welcome to another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. I'm Mark Regev, and I'm here as per usual with my co-host Ruthie Bloom, and today we're going to dedicate the show to an anniversary. Isn't that right, Ruthie?
That's right. Today we are January 21st. We're taping this on January 21st. Yesterday marked a full year of Donald Trump's second term, you could say, after a 4-year interval. It was the end of his first year, and we need to talk about his accomplishments, pitfalls, etc. Now, yesterday, to mark his anniversary, he gave an interview to News Nation, and let's hear what he had to say about the Middle East.
There are reports that they are still burning thousands of protesters alive. They also issued an assassination threat against you over the weekend. I know that you can't talk about what's on the table, but what is your response to Iran's leadership and their regime continuing to taunt you, threaten you, especially given over the weekend you said it's time for new leadership in Iran?
Well, they shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Wipe them off the face of the earth, Ruthie? What sort of language is that? That's hardly presidential. Though, I have a theory about this, but let's hear yours first.
First of all, Trump is Trump. So when he talks, he also always uses the pronoun they, them, and you often don't know who he's talking about. Why? Because in the same sentence, when he's talking about two different groups, he uses that pronoun, they or them, and not transgender pronouns. In this case, when he says we're going to wipe them off the face of the earth, or however he put it, he didn't mean the Iranian people. He meant the regime. And he didn't specify that. He didn't mean he's going to obliterate Iran. He has said all along that this regime has to go. The trouble was that when he first said to the Iranian people, who were really bravely going out to the streets and risking their lives, and many, many thousands have been slaughtered by regime forces, he said, keep going, help is on the way. And then nothing. Now, a lot of people are furious with him over that because here are the Iranian people getting killed every day. Then he came up and said, you know what? They were going to execute 800 Iranian protesters and they didn't do it, so good for them, something like that. I'm happy to hear that. It was a lie. They've been executing, the regime forces have been executing protesters every single day. So here's the question that everyone in Israel is asking. Okay, what's he waiting for? And then there's these discussions about what he's waiting for. What do you think about such a statement? By the way, his enemies, our enemies, Israel's enemies, constantly threaten to wipe us off the map, and they do mean all of us. They don't mean just the leadership.
So when Israeli leaders speak like that, the South African government goes to the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice, and they say this is incitement to genocide. Yes, wipe a country off the map. They don't do it, of course, when Iran uses that sort of language. So that's allowed. Yes, that's politically acceptable. But Trump's direct remarks could also be because he saw something on the intelligence side. Now, of course, I'm speculating. I'm no longer in government. I don't see classified intelligence. But because his remarks were so direct and so surgical and to the point, I think it's quite possible that his intelligence advisors came to the president and said to him that the Iranians are actually planning something, or they're talking about planning something. And he wanted to send a message back straight away. You don't go down that road. If you go down that road, you will pay a price that you don't want to pay. And I think that was why he said the statement. And there is historical fact, and the president alluded to it in his remarks. When Biden was the president of the United States, Pompeo was the former Secretary of State, and he was visiting the Gulf, and there was revealed there was an Iranian plot to try to assassinate him, to get Pompeo and Trump back for the assassination of Soleimani during the first administration of Donald Trump. And so the fact that he said it's important to draw a red line to say you cannot go down that road, and if you do, you will pay a huge price that you don't want to pay. I think it's an important message, and I think he knows they've done it in the past. Information they might want to do it again. You cannot do that.
Right. But here's the thing. It's an important message, but he keeps conveying that message and then appears to do nothing. I don't mean nothing. In June, he joined in Israel's attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities and ballistic missile production, and that was amazing, the 12-day war. But at the moment, the point is you can't keep threatening and then just stopping. It's not that, I actually do believe that he is now just preparing. We see movement of aircraft carriers, U.S. aircraft carriers. We see a whole lot of. We know that Israeli intelligence. We're not privy to this inside information, but we know based on I don't know, a lot of pundits in Israel in the know and former military chiefs who say that at the moment, Israel is preparing in every way possible to coordinate, especially to protect Israelis in the event that the U.S. attacks Iran and then Iran retaliates by sending missiles, launching missiles at Israel, which is every Israeli believes that's about to happen at some point. So let's say he's postponing this, not because he really believes that he's not going to do it, but because his military experts and chiefs are telling him, you got to hold off until all the ducks are in a row. However, so in that respect, I have to say that he's done an amazing job all year of backing Israel in the attempt to, I would say, to achieve peace through strength and war, actually. But here's the trouble. Right now, I think that he also is engaging in serious fantasies about the Middle East that if they ever come true, it's certainly not happening now, and he's in a hurry. And that, I mean, and we'll talk about that in a moment, I mean, for example, his so-called Board of Peace for the rehabilitation or whatever you want, a reconstruction of Gaza, and his fantasy about Syria, a unified Syria on the way to joining all of these peace accords.
So, as you say correctly, he's finished his first year, and what can we say we've learnt in the way he deals with Israel and the Middle East? So, it's clear Trump says he's not the Obama. In other words, if he's not afraid to use force if he feels that he needs to use force, if that's essential for U.S. interests. At the same time, he's not George W. Bush. He's very critical of the neocons. He doesn't believe in nation building and spreading democracy and these sort of things. He doesn't want American boots on the ground in long wars that never end. Yes, he's so the way, on one hand, he's not a pacifist. On the contrary, he's willing to use force. On the other hand, he's very economic. He's very surgical. He's very specific in the way and how he uses military force. He went into took out the Iranian nuclear facilities, surgical target, very low risk, always a risk involved, but very low risk from a U.S. point of view, and got his goal. The same thing we saw with in Venezuela. Uses force powerfully, effectively, limited in scope, get what you need done and get out, right? And I think that's, once again, it's a reaction both to the excesses of Obama and to George W. Bush. What do we see now about Iran? Is there clearly going to be an American strike? Well, we see that they're moving their forces into the neighborhood. They're getting ready to strike. But my question, and we spoke about this last week, and I think the jury is still out, is this moving forces close by to put pressure on the Iranians to agree to the sort of deal that he wants, to agree to the sort of arrangements that Trump wants them, dismantle their nuclear program, no nuclear enrichment, no missiles, no supporting terrorism. In other words, because the regime is weak, or does he actually want to pull the trigger this time? And then the question is, can he pull the trigger, Ruthie, without a visible Iranian action, a provocation, either that they start openly massacring their people again? It's not enough that they hang one or two people. They have to do something that justifies a U.S. strike, and I'm not sure that's easy.
Okay, first of all, there is no such deal according to which Iran will give up its nuclear weapons or ballistic missiles. Ain't happening. Iran has hegemonic designs on the region and the world. It's an ideological theocracy. Not happening. Same with Hamas in Gaza. This idea that you have to persuade them to give up their arms. It's not happening. Second, it's not true that there are no provocations, and I don't mean because they're threatening Trump's life. By the way, he's already had 2 actual assassination attempts on his life. No, they have not stopped slaughtering the protesters in Iran. They had a huge blackout on the internet, but when there was sporadic communications with Iranians in Israel and Iranian expatriates in America, there are reports the slaughter is continuing. And not only is it continuing, it's getting more and more vicious and barbaric. A lot of it is gassing, taking out people's eyes. It is shooting them in the streets. And then when family members come to try to retrieve a body of a loved one, they're forced to pay a fortune of money on the ammunition that was spent killing them. It is awful what's going on there. And so you don't need some other excuse. It has not quieted down. That's a lie. And just because Europeans keep, not really talking about it, and Iran is still sitting on the Human Rights Council, well, it's up to Trump. And Trump promised that he was coming, and he better make good on that. That's one thing. But now and I actually believe he will. But as for the other areas, and all of these are connected in a way, you see, because though his fantasy is that because Ashara, the now leader of Syria, is Sunni and not Shiite like the Iranian regime, that somehow, and he is against Iran, but he still doesn't grasp that Ashara is on the side of ISIS and Al Qaeda and has been enabling the slaughter of all the minorities in Syria. It's going on now. Horrific stories are emerging. There's slaughter of Kurds and Alawites and Christians, and Trump is turning a blind eye to that for some reason. And also, for some reason, it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not making it clear that that's what's going on, and instead agreeing to these sort of arrangements with Syria that are not just military, but also civilian. And there, I'm very pessimistic. That's one. And then there's the so-called Board of Peace for Gaza, which Prime Minister Netanyahu just agreed to join.
So the Board of Peace is the overarching body that will give instructions to a technical committee, which has in it Turks and Qataris. And people are saying these are Hamas's best friends, and they're going to help Hamas. They're going to cover for Hamas. I heard someone on the radio this morning on my way to the studio today saying something like, well, there mightn't be a Turkish soldier, but they could be a Turkish soldier in civilian clothes who will be creating an infrastructure for Hamas to use when the time is right. And those are concerns that I think, across the board in Israel. What is Turkey and what is Qatar going to be doing in Gaza? Are they really going to help us de-radicalize the place when they themselves are very sympathetic to the Hamas-type ideology? I would say the following, okay? And I could be wrong. But we got the ceasefire deal in Gaza for two reasons, and we discussed this at the time. Number one, Israeli military pressure supported by the United States. You needed both, because in the previous administration, when they were always trying to rein us back, then the Israeli military threat wasn't as credible. Under Trump, not only did he say you can go in there and finish the job, and he used very vivid language, all hell will break loose, he said on a number of occasions. But he also made sure that Israel had all the munitions while the previous administration held back munitions. So the Israeli military threat was very, very credible. But at the same time, you had, in parallel to the military threat, diplomatic action that was very effective, that Trump effectively used Hamas's best friends in the Sunni Muslim world, Turkey and Qatar, to put pressure on them to agree to the ceasefire. And maybe Trump believes that he can utilize their, in his opinion, good officers to get Hamas to demilitarize as they have to do in stage 2. Maybe that is his belief, and therefore he wants to keep them in the table. Netanyahu has refused that they have any military personnel on the ground in Gaza, but he has agreed, maybe not with a smile on his face, but de facto, he has agreed that they will be there on that overarching committee.
Well, here's the problem with all of this. It isn't merely that, I know when you say yes, Turkey and Qatar, and by the way, Egypt, these are all actors that aided and abetted Hamas. Egypt, by allowing all these years, allowing Hamas weapons and concrete to go into Gaza for the building of tunnels, and that's one thing. And also never allowing any Gazans, even during the war, a humanitarian escape into the Sinai or anywhere. So that's Egypt. Where Turkey and Qatar are concerned, the real danger here is not just whether they can be pressured to demilitarize Hamas. They're on Hamas's side. They're still funding Hamas. I have no doubt, and I think probably Netanyahu has no doubt, that that one of the problems is you can't defeat Hamas if it keeps getting funding and keeps being able to rebuild. So that's one thing. Another problem with the fantasy that Trump has about the day after Gaza, aside from the fact that we still have a deceased hostage's body that has not been returned. But leave that aside, because even if it were returned, I'd still be saying what I'm saying right now. there's this board of peace. I think that Trump has this idea that the United Nations, especially the Security Council, have been terrible, and that he's creating kind of an alternative. That's why he's inviting so many nations to join in. But the problem is that he has an idea, as does his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and his envoy Steve Witkoff, who, by the way, both of them have interests in Qatar, financial interests, which is bad enough by itself. They have this idea that on this board, as you said, there's an overriding board, and then there are committees under. But the actual running of day-to-day Gaza is going to be done, according to this, by Palestinian technocrats who aren't Hamas and who aren't Fatah and who are just Palestinian, business people or who have no interest in terrorism. That's a fantasy. There is no such animal. Okay. And if there were such an animal, Hamas would be doing what it always did when it has done always. They'd be throwing them off the rooftops. So there is where this problem is, the idea that this is going to somehow fix Gaza and rid it of its terrorist designs is la land.
So I actually think that President Trump, and once again, we're speaking on the week of his first anniversary as president for the second time, that there is a logic to when he says these things that sound like la land. When he said, the Palestinians should leave and we're going to turn it to the Riviera of the Middle East, right? So, everyone knew that that's not going to happen anytime soon. But there's a logic, I think, to his statements, and I want to remind you of something that Netanyahu said when Trump was here at the Knesset. He said we wouldn't have achieved the ceasefire deal without you, Mr. President. That's what he said. The American support for Israel, he said, it was a turning point in the war. It was a turning point in a positive way, an inflection point. When Trump came into office, we got a whole bunch of people released. And then we had the military support, and then we got the peace deal. And no one thought the sort of ceasefire deal, I shouldn't say peace deal because there's no peace, yes, but the ceasefire agreement that was signed, no one thought we could sign a cease and get all our hostages out, all the live hostages out, and all the deceased hostages, barring one. They've all come out, and it's all because of this deal that President Trump helped us facilitate. So I think he deserves thanks for that. Obviously, what happens in the future in Gaza remains open. President Trump says he shares our strategic goals, which is Hamas is disarmed, Gaza is demilitarized, yes, and we can work on that. Are we disagreeing apparently on some of the deals? It looks like there's, at least overtly, I don't know what happens when the rooms are closed. Maybe there's more agreement when the doors are closed. But it appears that on some of the issues we have different agreements, but it all stems from your point. You're worried that Trump is in, to use your word, la land on Turkey and on Syria. And here it's clear that on Syria, he wants to give this new Syrian president the benefit of the doubt. Trump knows exactly where he comes from, but maybe for all sorts of different reasons, he thinks he can work with this man. And it's the same with the Turkish president, who's been there for quite a while. I think he's been running Turkey since the turn of the century. But he is someone who is a known quantity, and Trump believes that he can work with him as well. There was a time when Israel also thought they could work with this man. I, unlike you, believe that it's possible to make deals with the Turks because I think ultimately the Turks are pragmatists. They have their ideology. The president of Turkey has said things that are openly anti-Semitic. Yes, he's said very problematic things, but the same Turkish president who said these terrible things has hosted in Ankara the Israeli president, and he's met Prime Minister Netanyahu in the past, and they've spoken on the phone. It's not the same level of animosity that you see from people like Hamas or the Iranians, for that matter. The new guy in Syria, who's a part of the Turkish orbit in many ways, he is saying all the right things, and you say you don't believe him. I don't believe him either. But is it possible to reach understandings, even if they're temporary, serve Israel's interests, I think that's worth exploring.
But look at his behavior. Look what's going on in Syria. I don't think most people realize the mass murder that's being carried out in Syria right now. So I'm not talking about can we make deals with him or talk to him. That's not the point. And by the way, when you say the Turks, we got to get rid of Erdogan. Erdogan is not the Turks. Okay, he is a jihadist, and I don't care that President Herzog went to talk to him. He is an enemy, a sworn enemy of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And by the way, speaking of the Jewish people, I would like to say one thing about Trump, another great accomplishment of his. And this has to do with America, also Europe, sort of by his statements. In America, he has not tolerated anti-Semitism. He has read the Riot Act to campuses that enable students for justice in Palestine to call for genocide and from the river to the sea and all those horrible protests. He says, I'm withholding federal funding. He is clamping down on all illegal immigrants, many of whom are Muslims, and there are also not only there are a lot of criminals and gangs, as he said. He spent a press conference, like 2 hours of a press conference, showing all the criminals he's deported. But he has been crystal clear about his intolerance for Jew hatred. And that is a very, very impressive thing. However, I have to say, and it was a message to the groypers in the Republican Party who don't agree with him. This was a message to Democrats, but also to anti-Semitic Republicans.
And I think here is the challenge of leadership, because it's very easy for him to criticize anti-Semitism on the progressive left side, because that's his political opponents anyway. It did take him a while, but I think, earlier this month, he did come out very strongly against anti-Semitism on the right. He said there's no room for anti-Semitism in the MAGA movement. And it's good that he said that. Once again, he didn't do it as quickly as he did with condemning left-wing anti-Semitism, but, better late than never. He said it strongly, and I've got no doubt that personally he's not anti-Semitic. I think he understood the power of some of these anti-Semitic bloggers and anti-Semitic people on podcasters and so forth. And maybe he didn't want to take them on directly, but that he stood up and he said, there's no room for anti-Semitism in the MAGA movement. That's a very important thing. Is he still going to be friends with these people? Is he still going to give them a platform? Are they still welcome to the White House? I don't know what the answers to those questions are, Ruthie.
Well, we saw Tucker Carlson at the White House a couple of times this week. Bad sign. Very bad sign. But that's another, and it's a bad sign because he's also buddies with J.D. Vance, the vice president, and Tucker's son works for J.D. Vance. Not a good sign. And I am seeing more and more Republicans on social media saying that they really hope that Marco Rubio changes his mind and rather than supporting J.D. Vance, runs against him in a primary. Again, this is all happening not now. We have 3 more years of this administration. But that's a bad sign, and that's true. But I have to say, again, you have to look at what these people, their behavior. There is slaughter going on in Syria, and that cannot be allowed.
I want to distinguish. You said in your remarks a moment ago, you said that the president of Turkey is a jihadi. And I think you need more nuance in looking at political Islam. It's like Nixon could make a deal with the Chinese to have more power against the Soviets, right? It's important to look at what's going on in the Islamic world. And with political Islam, there's no doubt that the Qataris and the Turks are inclined towards the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is a form of political and militant Islam, but it's not the same as the crazies. They can be similar in some ways, but there are distinguished. Once again, I would remind you that the Turkish president hosts in Ankara an official visit, rolls out the red carpet for the Israeli president. Now, you can say he's just playing games, okay? You can be cynical.
That was a while ago, Mark.
But he had an anti-Semitic period before. In other words, I think ultimately the Iranians, as Kissinger famously said, for them, Iran is a cause, it's not a country. In other words, they are all about exporting the Khomeini revolution to the world, right? That's the way they view it. I think when I look at the Turkish president, I see someone who sees himself as a new sultan, as a neo-Ottoman. He's about power politics, and because he's about power politics, he respects power. And as long as Israel is strong, he will be careful not to go too far in the battle against Israel. That's what I believe.
But
And
he
we have to be
supports
strong.
Hamas and houses Hamas. And yes, he hosted Herzog. That was before the war. He supported the October 7th massacre. He is an evil player on the world stage. Let's just get that straight. I mean, you may think, yes, you can deal with these and you can deal with those. And we always end up getting bitten in the ass, if you don't mind my saying so, every time we play that. Oh, yes, well, diplomacy, you just have to be pragmatic. And sometimes no. Okay, we heard that with deals with Hitler as well. Sorry, it doesn't work. We have to, and Israel can't. Now, here's Israel's situation. It's a little tricky. It's hard enough when you have an administration in Washington that was hostile, as was the Biden administration, and had Kamala Harris actually won instead of Trump. We would have been in major trouble. Okay. But it's also difficult when you have the best friend that Israel's ever had in the White House, because Prime Minister Netanyahu, he can't go up against him, and he shouldn't. I don't think he should go up against him. But he's in this tricky position now, because when he genuinely opposes something that Trump either says or does or implements or even, fantasizes about, Netanyahu is being extremely careful not to get on his bad side. And that causes a set of other problems. And I don't envy Netanyahu for that. And I honestly don't see any other figure in Israel at the moment who would have been able to maneuver that tricky situation as well as he's doing. We've got it hasn't all played out yet, of course. But the fact that he's decided to join the Board of Peace, for example, well, it was clever, because at first he said, oh, no, this is... It's clever because he's saying, okay, I'm on board with what Trump wants. I'm on board with this alternative, I don't know, United Nations kind of League of Nations, whatever you want to call it. But he knows. You think he doesn't know that this is basically baloney and that there's going to have to be another war in Gaza? And he knows it. He didn't tell me that. He doesn't tell anyone else that. But I know that he knows it because he's not stupid.
But also Trump says that, right? Trump also says that if Hamas doesn't disarm, then, we can go in and finish the job. So I'm not sure there's a strategic difference there between Netanyahu and Trump on the big issue, right? Hamas has to disarm. Maybe Trump has more confidence in his ability to do that without military action than Netanyahu has that confidence. Netanyahu might believe it's inevitable that we'll have to, right? But either way, we'll come to that bridge when it's proven that Hamas doesn't want to disarm. I think, when we look at the Trump first year, I think it can give us confidence as to the rest of the Trump term. He is a friend of Israel. I think Netanyahu is correct when he says cooperation, coordination, all-time high, right? And we're arguing about, the things in the periphery. And you're 100% correct. The job of Israeli leadership is to say, where do we draw, a red line in the sand and say, Mr. President, this we can't do, right? And you've got to pick your fights. And I think because the big issue is Iran and making sure that, by the end of this year, the situation with Iran has changed drastically for the better, then I think you can be flexible, and you should be flexible on Turkey and on Syria, even just from a pragmatic point of view. I know you said a moment ago that's a dirty word. But I think part of being in the real world of politics is prioritizing and saying, what are the most important things for me? And what is secondary? I can wait with that, or I'm not going to have an argument with him. The most important thing is the strategic things. And for Israel, the most important thing is that Iran is taken care of in the correct way, and that Gaza turns out in a way that will be successful. If on Syria, it's more like a holding pattern or kicking the can down the road, okay. That's not wasting time if you're using the same time allotted to you to do important things with Iran and with Gaza.
Well, there I agree with you, because I think that if really Iran if the Iranian regime is toppled, that doesn't mean there's going to immediately be what you call stability. I hate that word because it's one of those annoying diplomacy words, stability in the region, as though that's always a good thing. No, there won't be. It's going to be a lot of chaos, I imagine, in the immediate aftermath, but it's got to go, that regime. And that will affect Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza and Islamic Jihad also in the Palestinian Authority, etc. It'll affect so much. It'll also affect Syria. Also, I have to say, one of the things that Israel is preparing for, as far as I understand from, what I've gleaned from people much more in the know than I, especially about military matters, is that Israel is not only preparing for some kind of retaliatory strike from Iran in the event that Trump attacks, but that this time Hezbollah, which has been rearming, and thank God Israel every day has been bombing Hezbollah targets, but still hasn't defeated it completely, is that Hezbollah is preparing this time to help Iran and also attack. And when we get attacked from different fronts, that becomes trickier. And I think that the Israeli military and intelligence and all the securities forces are preparing for those kinds of scenarios as well, not to mention maybe the Houthis from Yemen as well, So right now we're in this kind of holding pattern. As I said, I believe that. You're absolutely right. We have to prioritize. I was just talking about how it's crucial to prioritize. It's also crucial not to go into fantasy land about peace busting out all over the Middle East before you actually know about it enough. And I think Trump, what's amazing about Trump is he actually doesn't know most of the history of it. There's so much he doesn't know. And yet, with all the ignorance about it, he has the gut instincts of what you do to bullies in the playground. And somehow it has been more successful than most presidents we've seen, and I don't know, in almost forever. So that's what's amazing about him. He's so sui generis that leaders in the world don't know how to deal with it, because he actually doesn't read books and know exactly the history of the Middle East. If you asked him, what about how did the history of the Middle East or the Ottoman Empire, I'll bet he doesn't know. And yet he seems to implement policies that are moving in the right direction.
We have to wind up because we're finishing the time, but I want to mention Lebanon because you mentioned it for a moment. If America attacks Iran, which is quite possible,
hopefully,
and if Hezbollah hits Israel in response to that, to support the Iranians, I think that will be a golden opportunity for Israel to finish off Hezbollah. And I think because it will be clear to everyone else in Lebanon who's not Hezbollah, including people in the Shia community, that this war was started not because of anything to do with Lebanon, but to do with Iran, right? They will be angry at Hezbollah. They'll be furious at Hezbollah for dragging Lebanon to a war that wasn't involved with them at all. You could actually see that sort of mistake by Hezbollah as pivoting a very, very positive change in Lebanon. Once again, that's why it's important to be pragmatic and wait for the right time to do what you need to do. I look forward to continuing this conversation because we could have discussed this for another half an hour next week when we meet again, Ruthie.
And next week when we meet again, who knows what will have happened in those 7 days.
Look forward to that, Ruthie.
What do classic Coke and President Trump have in common? And how does this relate to the Gaza Board of Peace? That is what we are going to discuss today. I'm Doron Spielman, and this is True East. What do President Trump and Coca-Cola have in common? Well, this is a can of Coke. And who remembers back in the 1980s when Coca-Cola had a new, fresh idea and came out with New Coke? It had this sweet, frankly, repugnant taste. It turned off masses of people around the world. Coke was trying to copy Pepsi, and they left their old formula and made a sweeter drink. It didn't work. Not only did it fail to be Pepsi, it actually started to damage the Coke brand itself. So Coca-Cola went back to classic Coke, and they made an absolute killing. Why? Because that was the original flavor. It's rich, you can feel it, it's just right. Coke was never about New Coke. Now here's the point. The new Gaza peace plan with the so-called Board of Peace, it's basically like New Coke. It's wrong, and it does not reflect the Donald Trump that we know. The first plan, the Trump Riviera plan that President Trump announced last February, this goes back to 2025, that plan made enormous sense. That was the classic Trump. It was bold, it was refreshing, it was intuitive. It made sense. President Donald Trump has always been at his best when he trusts his instincts, and his first instincts on Gaza were right. Just like this is classic Coke, and it's right. We want to go back to classic Trump. But before we compare the two plans, the plan a year ago and the new Board of Peace plan, there's one more lesson from New Coke that matters here. Coca-Cola had tested New Coke for years, and in lab tests, New Coke actually beat classic Coke and Pepsi. Now, the executives at Coke believed the data, they believed the focus groups, and they believed the experts. So they killed the old formula. What they didn't understand is that lab results do not equal reality. Somewhere, someone put this new Gaza plan in front of a group of people, probably in a room detached from reality, maybe in the Pentagon, maybe in the White House, and like a focus group experiment, everyone began to nod their heads when they began to shelve the Gaza Riviera plan and hear about the Gaza Board of Peace. And they convinced President Trump, possibly, to leave a good idea that was based on his instincts, a great idea, in fact, and move to a bad idea. I don't know what it was that actually caused President Trump to for sure leave, but my hunch is that it was those nodding heads that are to blame. But when the street tells you you're wrong, you can either listen or you can lose your brand. Let's put the classic Trump Riviera plan next to the Trump Gaza Board of Peace, and let's compare them side by side. In February 2025, President Trump presented a bold plan. It called for the voluntary emigration of Gazans to new countries. A future where Gaza is totally rebuilt, not as a terror enclave, but as an actual Riviera. And a future where families that have been trapped under Hamas for the last 20 years could start new lives somewhere else as full citizens, not as permanent refugees. The plan took the critical step of separating the population from Hamas. And that neutralizes Hamas's number one strategy, which is actually hiding behind those civilians. So it takes away the shield from Hamas so that they can be defeated. That plan was totally Trumpian. It came out of the middle of nowhere. It was clear, it was strong, it was decisive. As opposed to the Gaza Riviera plan, the first major failure in the new Gaza plan is it relies on an international committee called the Gaza Board of Peace that includes countries that openly want to destroy Israel. And let me be very clear about how absurd that is. The Board of Peace is not like the board of directors of a major corporation where everyone on that board shares the common interests of the company to succeed. Here, the company is called Gaza, and there are board members that were invited because they want Gaza to improve the good of the region. But there are also countries who want to use Gaza to destroy Israel, like Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey. You don't put the people who want to destroy the company on the board. On October 25, 2023, while the blood was still drying in Be'eri and Kfar Aza, Turkish President Erdogan publicly declared that Hamas are freedom fighters, and he accused Israel of war crimes, while Hamas's atrocities were still fresh. Qatar, that was the financial and planning hub of Hamas's attack on Israel. For over 10 years, leaders like Ismail Haniyeh and Khaled Masha lived in Doha, not in hiding, not under pressure, but as honored guests. From Qatar, they raised the funds and coordinated the strategy and directed the terror operations against Israel from October 7th throughout the 2 years of the war. Egypt was also asked to join the board. Now, we have to understand, all of the weapons in Gaza used on October 7th and after, all of them came from Egypt, where they were smuggled underneath the border. Egypt made a fortune paid by Qatar to fund the arms in Gaza. As soon as the opportunity exists, they're going to do it again. And what's going to stop them? Not the board of peace, which for some of its members is really a board of terror, Israel. Only Israel, once again, will need to stop them. The second major failure with the new Gaza peace plan is that it relies on a technocratic panel of people who are going to handle the day-to-day functioning of Gaza. Now, the head of that panel has already been chosen. He's a senior minister in the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is run by Mahmoud Abbas, an open anti-Semite and the Holocaust denier, and the architect of terror attacks that killed more than 1,000 Israelis, along with Yasser Arafat, during the Second Intifada. Now, Hamas is beaming with the idea of having a technocratic board made up of Palestinian Authority figures that are going to run day-to-day in Gaza. And the fact that Hamas agrees should be a real sign to us that something's wrong, because Hamas would never agree to a plan that calls for their going out of existence. Now, in 2007, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Authority, the same people were in charge of the Gaza Strip. What did Hamas do? They brought the leaders of the Palestinian authorities up to the top of 10-story buildings and they threw them off. And then they executed the rest in the streets. And they took over Gaza like this. So what would they want more than a technocratic regime run by the Palestinian Authority? I wouldn't want to be a Palestinian Authority member that's going to be left on this technocratic committee after this kind of initiative gets rolling. I wouldn't want to be there, and if I did, I certainly wouldn't climb to the top of any upper buildings. I'd weigh myself down to the ground as much as possible. There is no question that this ignores the reality in Gaza and pushes off the big questions for later. President Donald Trump's original Gaza Riviera plan started with the hard truth. You cannot fix Gaza without breaking Hamas's grip on it. The plan called for the voluntary relocation of Gazans to other countries, gives them citizenship so that they can live new lives elsewhere. And only then, when the citizens are out of the way, can we begin rebuilding Gaza when it is free of terror. That approach understood something absolutely fundamental. Hamas survives by hiding inside the population. When we remove that shield, then Hamas collapses. The current plan does the exact opposite. It keeps the population in place. It leaves the same families, the same clans, and social networks that produced Hamas right where they are. Again, Hamas didn't come out of nowhere. They're staffed and manned by the families in Gaza. There were only a few thousand Hamas members. It is the people that were subjected to the hatred and the ideology and the propaganda of Hamas that filled the ranks to the tens of thousands. So this new plan, instead of isolating Hamas, it actually embeds countries that openly back Hamas into the board of peace, which is not going to prevent Hamas from spreading its tentacles back again into the Gazan population. Now, President Trump's original plan, he understood the leverage the United States has and the strength the U.S. has to compel other nations to absorb Gazans as full citizens, not as refugees, not trapped in camps, not in an endless conflict. That would literally break the cycle. It was like such a breath of fresh air. That would remove Hamas's human infrastructure, and it would make real reconstruction of Gaza possible. You cannot build a Riviera on top of terror tunnels. You cannot de-radicalize the Gazan population while the radicalization engine of Hamas remains intact. And of course, you cannot protect Israeli families while enemies who celebrated October 7th are literally just across the fence. You can see them. Now, let me say something very clearly about Israel's role. If there is going to be any type of board overseeing Gaza, Israel shouldn't just be on the board. Israel has to have veto power over the board. We are the ones who are going to have to live with the reality of what happens there. Us, our families, our homes, our children. A plan that offers Israel to be just one more member, with the exact same standing as countries like Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, on a piece of land located 1 mile from our border, that is a strategic mistake, a major strategic mistake. Somewhere along the way, we allowed this to happen. And we can see it in the recent public disagreement between Israel and the United States over Qatar and Turkey. How did it happen? Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu has had a closer coordination with this administration than probably any other time in Israeli-US relations. It's produced incredible results. When Israel was left naked with no weapons after the Biden administration, President Trump completely revamped Israel's military supplies and, in fact, increased it beyond any previous level. But when President Trump pivoted away from the Riviera Plan, I don't think we could even imagine that we would reach such a misunderstanding about what is good for Israeli security and about what is realistic. I think to Prime Minister Netanyahu's credit, when he clearly saw where this was leading, he knew to put his foot down, something I am very doubtful if many other leaders in Israel would have had the courage to do. But we need to learn from this. Even our greatest ally, the United States of America, any ally between two different countries, has its own interests, and at some point, those interests are going to collide. And even at some point, perhaps the interests of the United States will collide with Israel's. And maybe we shouldn't have let it get this far. But now we need to lick our wounds, and we need to go back to that first Riviera Plan. And there needs to be a board of countries in which Israel has the veto power, not only on the board, but of who is included in the board. Now let's talk about where we need to go. We need to clear out the strip of all those who want to leave and engage in a massive building project. I envision 5 or 6 beachfront regions. The United States beachfront, perhaps the Emirates beachfront, maybe one for India, and then the Israeli beachfront, and so on. Each country needs to invest in creating their own beachfront. It will be kind of like Epcot, but instead of just facades, it will be real, with real culture, with restaurants, with beaches, with people that come from those countries. Think about it. You could take a 5-minute walk and go from the Indian beachfront to the Emirates beachfront, to the Israeli beachfront, to the United States beachfront. It's fantastic. 5 beachfront communities, each of which will require billions of dollars of investment. But you know what? I think they're going to make it back. It will be the only place in the world like it, where you can go almost like country to country from walking from beach to beach. Imagine the music, imagine the drinks, imagine the food, imagine the culture. And you've got the ocean there, the beautiful Mediterranean. And yes, absolutely, Israel will be one of the beaches. Going back thousands of years, Jews have been living in Gaza continually until they were expelled by the Arabs in 1948. The Jewish community in Gaza was the longest continuous community there. It goes back before Muhammad and even the rise of Islam. Now, maybe someone out there is shaking their head. Can I prove it? The answer is yes. The Great Synagogue of Gaza goes back to the Roman period. The archaeology and history are there. The pictures are there. It goes back to the 6th century CE. That's the 500s. Islam was founded by Muhammad in 632, 100 years later. The mosaic floor that's found in that synagogue and exists, and the pictures show not Muhammad. It shows King David playing his harp. Look it up. There was also an area of Gaza inside Gaza City called Harat al-Yehud, which means the Jewish quarter of Gaza. It's located inside Gaza City in what is today called the village of Zaytun, which is just south of Jabalia. We hear about Jabalia throughout the war. I visited Zaytun and Jabalia during the war. According to Ottoman census records, this goes back 450 years, the majority of Zaytun in the center of Gaza was Jewish. It had more than 600 Jews living there. And that existed until they were forced out by Arab violence and expelled in 1948. Now, what happened in 1948? Gaza went from being under Ottoman control and then British control to go under Egyptian control, not Israel. Israel wasn't in charge of Gaza. Egypt was in charge of Gaza. And Gaza was immediately used by Egypt to continue launching attacks against the young state of Israel. That continued until Israel captured it from Egypt in 1967 during the Six-Day War, when Israel was attacked from Gaza. Fast forward to 2005. the state of Israel pulls thousands of Jews. These are not just Jews. These are the greatest Israelis, farmers, people of agriculture and of environment. We pulled them out of Gush Katif. It was a despicable withdrawal from Gaza. We left every single community. We removed every single soldier. And we literally handed Gaza over on a silver platter to full Palestinian control. What did we get in return? Well, you know, tens of thousands of rockets, 3 military actions, 2 wars, and ultimately the massacre of men, women, and babies on October 7th. That experiment failed. So why will Israel have a beautiful beach in Gaza, and why will Israel control security in Gaza? We have the history in Gaza. We've spilled the blood over Gaza, and we're not going to outsource our security to anyone. We mustn't outsource our security to any international force, not to committees, and not even to the United States. Why? Because they change administrations and policies every 4 years. The only people with a consistent policy to protect Israelis is Israel. We didn't sacrifice nearly 2,000 people on October 7th to hand our security and to outsource it. We've learned that lesson. And if we've learned it, we're not going to put our guard down again. Israeli security has got to be non-negotiable, and that is point final. Now, the plan can work, but it requires a lot of American muscle and long-term thinking. Thinking in terms of decades, kind of like the Chinese, not just in 2-year congressional cycles. It means really having vision. And Trump's Riviera plan understood this leverage. The United States has the strength to force a real change, to compel countries to absorb Gazans as citizens, and to break the terror pipeline at the very source, to remove the population Hamas hides behind. You cannot build a Riviera, as I mentioned, directly on top of terror tunnels. And you cannot de-radicalize a people by leaving the regime untouched. And you're not going to be able to sell Israelis a plan that brings our enemies directly on our border. Now in Israel, trust in President Trump has been enormous. He restored our deterrence. He came to the Knesset. He reaffirmed us when others hesitated. Israelis see him both as a street fighter and a businessman who knows when a deal is broken. So let's be very, very clear. This is Trump's Gaza Riviera plan versus the board of so-called peace plan. It's a question, classic Trump or new Trump? We want classic Trump. That is how wars are going to end. That is how regions are going to change. And that is how history is going to be made.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Debra Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. We have breaking news of an attempted stabbing terror attack in Jerusalem. The IDF confirmed in an initial report that an attempted stabbing attack occurred in the tunnel checkpoint area in Jerusalem. No injuries were reported, and the details are currently under review. But the biggest story of the day is earlier today, thousands gathered to pay their final respects to Master Sergeant Ran Gvili, the last Israeli hostage to be returned from Gaza. The funeral procession of Gvili took place in Kibbutz Alumim in southern Israel, the very kibbutz he gave his life defending on the morning of October 7th. Gvili's remains were retrieved and identified by the IDF. Today he was finally buried in Israel after 843 days in Hamas captivity. Attending his funeral were Prime Minister Netanyahu, members of his coalition, President Herzog and his wife, security officials, military and Israel police personnel, and massive crowds of Israelis. Israelis who looked at Ran as a symbol, Israelis who resonated with his story and waited so patiently for his return. Talik Gvili, Ran's mother, mourned her fallen son, but also sent words of strength. Take a listen.
רן תדאג שם מלמעלה, לאחד את כולם. כי אני פה, למטה, קצת דואגת. רן תבקש מהרוגי המלכות להתאחד, לשלוח כוח לכל עם ישראל, לחזק את החיילים ואת השוטרים שלנו, כי אנחנו עדיין במשימה לחסל את האויבים. חמאס, ג'יהאד, טרוריסטים מזוהמים, ניסיתם להפחיד אותנו. ניסיתם להבהיל את עם ישראל. תראו מה נשאר ממכם. חכו ותראו מה יישאר ממכם.
Speaking at the funeral, President Isaac Herzog reminded the crowd of the sheer bravery of Ron Gvili and his valiant effort to fight for our homeland. Let's hear the clip.
אנחנו עומדים כאן היום בשעה קדושה, שוברת לב, שבה רני הגיבור והאהוב, החטוף האחרון, מובא סוף סוף למנוחת עולמים באדמת הבית. הבית אותו אהב, הבית שלמענו נלחם יחד עם חבריו, הבית עליו יצא להגן בגבורה עילאית ובחירוף נפש. באותו יום מר ונמהר. הבית שלו, הבית שלנו, של כולנו.
Also, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke at the funeral where he declared that a new kibbutz will be built in Gvili's honor. Named Renanim, the kibbutz will sit just east of Beersheba in southern Israel. After honoring Gvili in his moments of burial, the Israeli Prime Minister also reminded the crowd of the road ahead. Take a listen.
אנחנו דבקים גם ביעדינו האחרים. לפרק את החמאס מנשקו, לפרז את הרצועה, וגם את זה נשיג. ידעו מבקשי נפשנו שמי שמניף יד על ישראל ישלם מחיר כבד מנשוא.
Ron Gvili will forever remain a symbol of pure Zionism and dedication to the state and the people of Israel, the first to enter the battle and the last to leave. May his memory forever be a blessing. And the U.S. military is fully stationed in the region with the Military Air Force exercise drill already planned and announced by CENTCOM to boost readiness and mobility. In the last hour alone, Trump tweeted this, saying, quote, a massive armada is heading to Iran, sending a clear threat to Tehran, negotiate a fair and proper deal, or suffer an attack greater than the last. Interestingly, Trump reiterated the issue of nuclear weapons, adding that the time to negotiate is running out. And before we go for now, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code that's on your screen to join. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today for all of our updates. I'm Diva Klein. Thank you so much for watching ILTV on the Hour, and I hope to see you next time.
The main thing that is happening right now is the greatest massacre in our modern history in Iran. They have snipers, they have machine guns, military-grade machine guns that are just pointing into the crowd and shooting. They are so angry based on the amount of blood that has been spilled that they don't care. They don't care if they die anymore. Supporting the Iranian people right now is not for the sake of Iranian people. You're helping Iranian people get rid of your own enemy.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS, and I'm here with Armin Navabi, an Iranian-born author and activist, as well as the founder of the Atheist Republic, one of the largest secular and ex-Muslim communities in the world. Now, Armin is a leading voice against Islamism and religious authoritarianism, drawing, of course, from his own experience growing up under the Islamic Republic of Iran. Through his writing and advocacy, he's really become a prominent defender of free expression, as well as separation of religion and state in the Middle East and beyond. Welcome, Armin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And in addition to being against Islamism, I'm also against Islam as well. And I think more Iranians are also more and more anti-Islam. And I think based on what's happening in Iran right now, if Islam had any chance of survival before, based on the crimes of what the Islamic Republic has just committed, I think they just lost any remaining chances that they had. I was just watching a video from a grieving mother looking for the body of her child among all of the body bags, and at the very end of it, last few seconds, she started cursing the holiest figures in Shia Islam. And I'm getting so many reports of people from not just from our generation or younger, but from the older generation saying that they would never step foot in a mosque, that's swearing not just at the Islamic Republic, not just at Khamenei, but also the most sacred figures in Shia Islam.
Well, we'll speak about this more for sure, but I want to speak about the current situation to start. Now, Armin, you have been covering this every single night, and you've long said that this regime can't be reformed. What makes this uprising different from 2009, 2019, 2022, and why does it feel like a point of no return for the Islamic Republic?
The main thing that is happening right now is the greatest massacre in our modern history in Iran, and it's unbelievable that not more people um, are talking about this. And by the way, Emily, thank you so much for your coverage. I could tell you that you are a hero to us Iranians, and hopefully, once this is all over, we could welcome you in Iran as a hero, because your coverage and all of this has been so valuable, and we will never forget what you have done for us. So thank you to you and all Israelis who have been backing us during this really hard time. We will never forget this. But also, to answer to your question, the reason why this is different, the reason why this is different from previous ones is because we're not just fighting against the Islamic Republic, we're fighting for something. We're fighting for the return of Pahlavi to Iran. The other waves of this revolution was mostly just anti-Islamic Republic, but we didn't have unity over what we want in its place, and now we do. And people in Iran are giving their lives just to be able to shout his name in the streets of Iran. And this is why this is not just our revolution, but it's also your revolution. This is a revolution for Israel, this is a revolution for America, and this is a revolution for the rest of the world. Because the Iranian people, in the same way that Israelis have paid the highest price to fight an evil that is a threat to the whole world, Iranian people are also today paying the heaviest price to fight the same evil that Israel has been fighting, that will not just save us Iranian people, but save everyone else. So this is why when we're asking for help, this is the help that will come towards us, if it comes finally, eventually, hopefully comes. It's not an act of charity, because it's cooperation, because the Iranian people are paying the most of the price to get rid of an evil that is not just targeting Iranian people. I mean, I grew up in Iran. We were always told that the ultimate goal is world domination. We were told that Pahlavi was the first step, Israel is the small Satan, which is the second step, and United States is the great Satan, which is the final step, that will lead to eventual world domination. I'm not saying they will ever be successful at that, but given that's their goal, you could imagine how big of a threat to everyone around the world they are, given that their goal is to completely dismantle the world order as we know it. So supporting the Iranian people right now is not for this, just for the sake of Iranian people. You're helping Iranian people get rid of your own enemy, and they're paying, and they will never forget this. By the way, like, it's important to realize that for Israel and for United States and other countries, getting rid of the Islamic Republic is a huge plus for them, but also the relationship that Iran is going to have with your country after is even is something on top of that, because we're going to be our state is going to go from being part of a problem to being part of a solution. Especially for Israel, we're going to be cooperating. Our militaries are going to, our Artish is going to be cooperating with the IDF when it comes to fighting terrorist groups all around our neighborhood. Our Savak is going to be cooperating with Mossad when it comes to intelligence operations around the neighborhood. So So we're going to be allies, just like we always have been for the past 2,500 years. We're going to go back to being allies again and working with each other side by side to basically neutralize our enemies. So at this moment, the help that we get is going to strengthen the bond that we're going to have after this revolution is successful. So one way or another, just let me be clear, because even if we don't receive any help, we Iranian people, we are going to get rid of the Islamic Republic. The help that we're asking for is not because it's necessary to get rid of the Islamic Republic. The help that we're asking for is to reduce the cost. Is to reduce the cost for removing the Islamic Republic, and it's also so that the relationship that we are going to have with the countries that helped us, we strengthen that bond, and it's basically a win-win for both of us. The win for us is that we're going to have less people dying. The win for United States and Israel is going to be that we will never forget the help that we received, and it's just going to strengthen the bond and cooperations that we're going to have. Iran is a great nation, and I'm pretty sure being an ally of the country that we are about to come is going to be a huge advantage to any country that right now takes advantage of this opportunity and helps reduce this mass slaughter right now.
That's actually a really important point. Fighting the regime actually helps all sides here, and delaying help only makes the fall of the regime slower and, as we spoke about, more deadly. As you know, the regime keeps pushing this myth of foreign interference, while at the same time importing thousands of terrorists from Iraq to crush Iranian protesters. What does that contradiction tell us about who the real foreign actors are in this equation?
I mean, their own everything that they're accusing us for, they did worse during the revolution that they celebrate. The revolution that they did in 1979, they were trained by the so-called Palestinians. They had help from Libya. They had so much foreign help, and they were trained. They got ammunition from so-called Palestinians and Libya. And they accuse us right now of being supporting terrorism in the streets. They burn cinemas with people in them just so that they could blame it on the Shah. So it's obviously projection. But when it comes to foreign intervention, I mean, no revolution has been successful. I mean, there are not that many. The vast majority of revolutions have been successful with some foreign help. The United States Revolution, became successful because of French help. So I don't understand. Like, that is what is the problem with that? The Iranian people, a lot of people were criticizing Iranians that you should do this yourself without any foreign help. Now we see the cost of the revolution. Now that the Iranian people have done more than anybody even imagined they would do, and you see the number of people dying, everybody could see that some help would go a long way to reduce the massacre. And again, I mean, anybody who says, no foreign intervention, if you look at empirical data, where has isolationism gotten us? Every single society that has become prosperous, that has become a great nation, has done that because of cooperation and with other great nations, with allies. So Iran has a huge potential of becoming a great nation, and anybody helping us right now is just basically the beginning of many future cooperations to come. So, I mean, America is the greatest superpower on earth, and it started its journey of being a nation state by the French helping with its revolution. So why should we not ask for some help for our revolution?
Yeah, that's a great point that you mentioned. Now, many Iranians have heard strong rhetoric from President Trump and figures like Steve Witkoff, but then watched as action didn't immediately follow that, leading to ultimately very barbaric bloodshed at the hands of the regime. From what you're hearing directly from people on the ground, how damaging has that silence been, and what do Iranians need to see now? I mean, is there still momentum?
So there is still momentum, because every single report that I'm getting from inside Iran, what I'm hearing is that there, even if there, it has ups and downs, right? So you have sometimes the presence is really high, sometimes it dies down a little. But just because it dies down a little, it doesn't mean that the drive, the motivation, uh, has gone away, right? Because what I'm hearing is that they are waiting to start again. They're waiting for another spark to go to go back into the streets, and and actually more than before. Everything I've heard from every single person from inside Iran is that they are so angry based on the amount of blood that has been spilled that they don't care. They don't care if they die anymore, and they think that their understanding is that the price that they have paid so far is too much for this not to work out. So I hear people talking about it as if they're talking about something so casually, like, oh yeah, my brother died, my sister died, my neighbor died, and we're waiting to see when we could go out again. Like while reporting that, witnessing people dying right next to them. The crazy thing is that a lot of people are reporting that everybody knows somebody who has died. That's how big the level of death killings has been, that everybody knows somebody who has died, which is insane. And the fact that they can't wait to go back into the streets. Like, people come and they get their audio recording out or their messages out, and they're saying that they're waiting for another opportunity. Right now, the military presence is high, and most of them, by the way, is from Hashd Shabi in Iraq, and Fatimiyun from Afghanistan, and Zainabiyun from Pakistan, which suggests that the Iranians themselves that are part of the regime seems that they're refusing order, right? And they basically brought the proxies, the terrorists from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. So yeah, Hashd Shabi, which is the popular mobilization front, that's from Iraq, and Fatimiyun is from Afghanistan, and Zainabiyun is from Pakistan. Yes. So apparently most, I don't know if it's most, but a huge portion of the people who are being killed right now are from these foreign terrorists that the Islamic Republic is bringing in, and that is a red line that even some people within the regime cannot tolerate, and I think it's going to cause a lot more defections, seeing foreigners coming into Iran and killing Iranians. And but the ways that they're killing people is they have snipers, they have machine guns, military grade machine guns that they're pointing into the crowd. The reports suggest that they're not aiming for anyone specifically. They're just pointing into the crowd and shooting. There was a report of some children in a park, like 24 or 25 children in a park, just chanting. And the armed forces showed up and they just killed every single one of those children. There are reports of people coming with backpacks because they have water bottles for everybody. They have like napkins for everyone else. And everybody is encouraging everybody when they come into the streets. They look at each other and they congratulate each other. There are reports of people were reporting that elderly people were standing in front and the younger people were trying to get them to go back, and the elderly people were saying like, no, because we you guys are young and you should build the country, so let us be at the front so that we got shot first. There was a report of a husband and wife that were in the streets, and the wife told they passed a dead body, and the wife told her husband that if I get shot, you make sure you run away because I don't want our daughter to be an orphan. There's so many messages like this that are coming on. There was, I think, I don't know if you saw the audio recording from on Manitou. There was this daughter of a high-ranking IRGC member that called in, that was crying, that felt so much shame because she was part of this family, family of the regime, and she was telling the Iranian people that I promise you that we're not with these people. Like, she felt so much guilt and shame for being part of them, and she was begging the armed forces to put down their weapon.
Yeah, let's play that clip actually.
فاطمه جان، درود به شما، به برنامه خوش اومدید.
سلام، صدای من میشنوید؟
بله خانم، رسا در خدمتیم، خوش آمدید.
من از داخل نظام تماس میگیرم.
بله.
پدر من جزو یکی از عوامل نیروی سرکوبگره. شاهدم که چه جنایتایی فقط پدر خود من کرده.
فاطمه جان،
الان دستور میده بکشین. من کجا بیام؟ من عکس دارم، فیلم دارم، مدارک دارم. ما اینا نیستیم. من سر جنبش محض رفتم، منو گرفتن با 3 تا از دوستان، ولی منو شناختن. پدرم اومد منو آزاد کرد، ولی دوستامو ول نکردن، به اونا تجاوز شد. ما اینا رو نمیخوایم. ما از خانواده ایناییم، ولی اینا دارن بچه‌هاشون دارن. میدونین ما خودمون چه دردی کشیدیم از این پدرهای سنگدل. به زور سرمون چادر کردن، نماز گفتن بخون، نماز شب بخون. ما خودمون زجر کشیدیم. من اگه توانی داشتم اولین نفری بودم که اینو بکشم.
There was another person that called into Manitoba, and she was mentioning that her sister had MS, and she was, even though she was walking with a cane, she still joined the protest. And when they started shooting, everybody ran away, but she couldn't run fast because she was on a cane, and they shot her on the side. And when she fell, other people went to try to grab her. And the people who went to try to grab her, they were being shot as well. So four bodies basically dropped right next to her, and eventually her sister, she was on the ground and she was still breathing, and even though she couldn't move anymore, they took another shot at her heart and killed her while she was on the ground. There's so many videos. The video that I just watched before coming here, I was already mentioned that a mother who was looking at the bodies to find her child, at the end she starts cursing Islamic holy figures. There's so many. It's unbelievable. And also, I'm getting reports that the number, I don't know, this needs to be verified, but a lot of people from Iran are saying that the 12,000 or 20,000 number that they're giving out, it's a joke. They're saying that, I don't know if they're in a position to assess the numbers or not, but they're saying that their assessment is that the numbers are way, way higher than that. So, but we have to see. But my perception right now is that once we actually get the full reports, I think we're witnessing one of the greatest massacres in history, and I think a lot of people are going to be shamed for decades to come for either being silent about this or whitewash. A lot of people are calling it a human rights violation. It's a human rights violation is when you do this to the citizens of another country. I don't think they have name for this. I don't think they have a name for this when a regime does this to the people that it's supposed to be governing. This is a human rights violation if a government, if a military of a government goes and attacks another country and does this to a people of another country. What the Islamic Republic is doing right now, Iran doesn't have a name. We still haven't come up with a name for it. But here's the thing. I just don't want to be all negative because the price is very, very high, but what we're getting in return is worth it, and I know it's worth it because the Iranian people are still coming out and still fighting after all they have paid, so they think it's worth it. And eventually, when we succeed, this is going to be a pivoting point, like a turning point in history. I think this is going to change everything. I think you're going to see Iran becoming a major solution to many of the problems that we're seeing in the Middle East and the rest of the world. We're going to be a source of secularism, democracy, just like when the Islamic Republic came into power, it started becoming a problem not just in Iran, but the entire region and worldwide. I think once Iran becomes a secular democracy, we're also going to become a major solution worldwide. We're going to have a positive impact to all our neighbors, to everything in that region, all the countries in that region. And I think the idea is because the Iranian people have the proper values, the values of secularism, democracy, individual rights, equality before the law, separation of powers, everything, all the values that makes a society great. The Iranian people have that, and this is why they're so undeserving of the regime that they have, because the best people have the worst regime has been forced upon the best people, in my opinion. I think the nation of Israel and the nation of Iran are the two groups of people that are fighting for life in a sea of death, all around them. And I think that I think Israel deserves not to be alone in this region anymore. So I think that by liberating Iran, Israel will finally have an ally, have a partner fighting side by side with it. And I think that that will go a long way, and I think we're going to see a lot of. This is why I'm saying that Israelis, please don't think that if you get involved, and I hope you do, and Americans, please just don't just do this for yourself. Do this for yourself. I promise you, you're going to see the benefits, the returns on this is going to be you're not going to regret being with or without help we're going to be successful in this revolution, but because we're going to be successful, you're not going to regret being part of it and being responsible for all of us getting there. So we're just waiting. And by the way, I do think that something is going to happen. I don't know when this is going to come out, but I'm happy I'm happy to have heard that the reason why Israel delayed the attack was not because they didn't want to help, but because they thought that the attack that was planned originally was insufficient, and they wanted something more meaningful and significant. So that's the reason for the delay, and I understand that, because the Islamic Republic, if they know that this is it, they will throw anything and everything they can at everybody around them, especially Israel. And it's very important for the attack to be carried out in a way that Israeli lives are protected. As long as it's coming, we understand the delay.
Yeah, I've also heard the numbers are much higher than what we're seeing, at least being reported in the media now initially. But I do want to ask you also about the aggressive disinformation campaign by the regime and its apologists in the West. I'm wondering if you can explain a little about how the Iran lobby operates and why it goes into overdrive at moments like this when the regime is most at risk. I mean, we're even seeing figures like Tucker Carlson echo talking points that benefit the regime. It's funny, you actually had a viral moment with Goldie Gamari this week when Tucker Carlson's bizarre rants were literally being broadcasted by the regime on state TV. How does this psychological operation work, and why is it so effective in confusing Western audiences?
Yeah, so the Islamic Republic has, if I want to simplify it, it has the hardliners and the reformers, and the reformers are a much bigger problem than the hardliners, because the hardliners don't know how to do politics, but the reformers have so-called reformers, right? The so-called reformers, they're actually a lot more brutal and barbaric, but they know how to play politics, and they also know how to put on a face, like basically pretend that they're civilized and they're abiding by international standards. And the reformers, the so-called reformers, people with, and their leaders are Rouhani, Zarif, Arakchi, Tajzadeh, and people like that. They have managed to figure out exactly how to infiltrate into the American political system, and they have been working on these networks for many years. I mean, even doing NIAC, is a lot of people understand NIAC is part of the reformers arm of the Islamic Republic. They also have so many other ways. They have so many allies. They have so many friends. They spend a lot of money in building these networks to have some influence over Washington, D.C. And this is the reformers are very important because they also had a plan. They had a plan to sell their leader of the opposition, their own candidates for leader of the opposition, to the United States. Like, for example, Nargis Mohammadi or Taraneh Ali Dosti, or some alternatives to Prince Reza Pahlavi, so that they could, as we call it in Iran, transition to a third republic. So the first republic is Khomeini, the second republic is Khamenei. The third republic is supposed to be an Islamic republic that is going to pretend that they have reformed, that everything is okay now. But but if you actually look at the record of the people that they pick as the alternative to Prince Reza Pahlavi as the leader of the opposition, you can see that they're anti-imperialist, and they're anti-imperial. I mean, they're not technically anti-imperialist; they're pro-imperialist, but they call themselves anti-imperialist. And they're anti-Zionists, and they're anti-Pahlavi. By the way, for Israelis, it's very telling that everybody who is anti-Pahlavi, almost everybody, the Venn diagram is like really closely matches. Most people who are anti-Pahlavi are also anti-Zionist or anti-Israeli, which shows that Pahlavi and Pahlavi supporters and our patriots, they're on the right side of history. And also, by the way, it's very telling that the Iranian people, the name that everybody is calling in the streets of Iran in these protests is somebody that is a very close friend of Israel and wants to is prioritizing, recognizing the state of Israel in their transition, in the 100-day emergency transition plan as priority number one in week one of the foreign policy. If people read the booklet, so somebody that has this high of a priority when it comes to normalizing relationship with Israel is the Iranians pick for the reader, which shows Iranians' view on Israel, right? So that's very telling. So when it comes to lobbies, by the way, there's another more sneaky lobby that we have to pay attention to, because a lot of these different